Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
The novel Sun Over the City finally got the recognition it deserved. It was printed in a fairly large circulation, and it did not lie dead weight on the store shelves, as it used to be with other Hunter books. The novel was bought up like hotcakes. Even one director, young but promising, signed a contract with Hunter for screen adaptation. For the first time in the past year, the writer who had become famous breathed fully, filled with pride in himself. A corner of his mind, he realized that the success of the novel, by and large, was a kind of gift from his publisher. On his own initiative, decided to invest in a PR campaign to the full program. Such generosity was a consequence of tragic events in the life of Hunter Wilson. Exactly 1 year ago, his wife Margaret died in a car accident. The publisher wanted to cheer up Hunter, who for 6 months has completely shrunk and stopped writing, locking himself away from everyone in his house. And guess what? As soon as the novel was talked about from all irons, Hunter resurrected and became the same. Yes, he understood all this, but these thoughts internally corrupted him. He needed no favors. Hunter was almost convinced that Sun Over the City, and without all this charity, could have won the hearts of his readers. It just so happened to be the case. In fact, the money that the publisher had spent on advertising could have been invested earlier. Surely, it is common for the publishing business money, just earlier that he was greedy, not believing in his talent and afraid of losing losses. Another 6 months passed. Passions about his novel have somewhat subsided. Hastily filmed and released on the big screens, the movie. Basically, let's face it, it failed. The costs of its production were, of course, paid off. Even the profit of pennies turned out, but Hunter himself was able to watch only the first 20 minutes of the tape. Spit and vowed never to get involved with young, even if promising directors. Publisher hustled on the wave of fading success, needed at all costs. A new novel, even average now, could be well sold. Hunter began to break, at first by hints, then persuasion, and finally, demands that was quite logical, based on the clauses of the contract signed with the publisher in the next 5 years to give out on the mountain at least a novel a year. The advance payment was given to him, and it was just a matter of taking a pen and paper and sitting down at his desk. Hunter couldn't type on the computer because he didn't have enough speed. His fingers couldn't keep up with the heated thought. At first he wrote on paper and gave 15-20 pages to his secretary, and the case in such a tandem got along quickly. But this time Hunter's thought barely moved, and he didn't want to see anyone near him, so he decided to write electronically. At times, mysticism became a trend. This summer, sales of a thriller with the presence of the otherworldly showed good sales, and the next book the publisher ordered Hunter in this genre. But this is not quite his niche. He could write good detectives. Even fiction turned out quite tolerable. But to pure mysticism, such he never wrote, but in the end, thought Hunter, it is not important what to write about, and it is important as he will write. In his head formed a plot about poltergeist, which pursued one unfortunate family wherever it did not escape from him. At the same time, all those who tried to help this family, uncleanness also began to harass. So in the end, those who wanted to get involved in the affairs of the family, there was no one left at all, and between its members increased strife, nerves, resources were exhausted so much that it was time to go begging. But somehow one day, no, one beautiful night, and Hunter couldn't think of anything else. The finale should be grandiose, unpredictable, and partly returning the reader from fantasy to reality. But already the first chapter immediately went wrong. 5 variants of the beginning were mercilessly erased and deleted even from the trash. The publisher began to inquire about the progress of the work twice a week. It was the beginning of July, and summer would slip away along with the current trend. Autograph sessions still had to be arranged. Acquaintances and strangers alike continued to take notes on social media and snip phones. Hunter didn't have time to get his own literary agent to handle these kinds of problems. He began to tire of success. Sensing his impending failure, something had to be done, and he decided to hide from the public eye. With the money accumulated in his work, he bought a house in some wilderness, warned everyone not to dare to touch him, at least in the next 2 months, and left, taking with him only bedding, a laptop, and 3 cases of Irish beer. Arriving at the place where he was met by the real estate agent who had handled the deal from start to finish, Hunter couldn't believe his eyes. It was that rare occasion when everything looked much better in real life than it did in the photos. The house was beautiful. A road surrounded by coniferous forest led to it from the town, tightly adjoining the steep shore of a huge lake. The shore had no guardrails, and the agent warned that in especially rainy weather, drive carefully because you could slip and fly 15 meters down, right onto the rocks. Not far from Hunter's new home, there was another structure that no one had warned him about before. "I'm going to have neighbors?" He wondered, staring at the agent in bewilderment. "They are almost never here," he reassured him. "They're going to sell the house too. So I assure you, no one will bother you in the next 6 months. They're having problems with the documents. So far, so and so. Are they here now? I didn't see any while I was shopping for you, so I didn't bother you about it. Anyway, it's the quietest place you can find in the area, considering the convenience and beauty of the scenery. It's only 20 kilometers to the city. In good weather, in an hour you can turn back and forth if you need something. Tourists have taken a liking to the opposite shores. There are no available sites for them here. I bought you groceries for a week, as you asked. Everything on the list. Something in the refrigerator, something in the basement. I'll show you around." "Okay, thank you." And this place, let me point out, continued to persuade Hunter agent, is chosen with a perspective just for you. One day you'll be able to buy the neighboring plot, and then there won't be a single obstacle left. You're a famous writer, aren't you? Have you made inquiries yet? Well, you should know your clients by sight. I read your sunshine over the city in a heartbeat. For professional reasons, no offense, Hunter, just out of interest. And how did you like the novel? Objectively. Objective? What's that supposed to mean? Very subtly captured all the details of city life, how the inhabitant of the stone jungle was pulverized, how infantile and suggestible he became, and all this against the background of a detective story. Just brilliant. Wow, Hunter was genuinely impressed. Yes, you'd make an excellent book reviewer. Have you tried blogging? Oh, come on, I mean, it's from the heart. Real estate feeds me. Reading is just a hobby. Let's go inside, shall we? Come on, let's go. After talking all the details over with the agent, Hunter was finally rid of his endless pleasantries and left alone in the house. When the noise of the engine lurking around the corner of the car became silent, Hunter was stunned by a silence like he had never known. Amazing, and it happens. The weather outside was windless, and the bright sun was shining through the dark and mighty spruce and pine trees, which were already slanting toward the west. There were no birds, no creaking of trunks, no rustling of red maples and young oaks that grew near the house. There was only the slight groaning of the floorboards as Hunter walked through the rooms, putting away the linens in the closets and preparing the desk for future work. Even goosebumps sometimes ran down his back from the strange feeling of his own, almost non-existence, as if the world had suddenly lost sight of him and wasn't going to look for him. The small hall turned out to have a fireplace. The agent assured Hunter that it was working. Even a pile of dry wood lay beside it. For the sake of interest, Hunter opened the damper, threw a couple of logs into the hearth, put some newspapers under them, in which the laptop was wrapped, and struck a match. The fire lit quickly, and the draft was excellent. Great! At night he would sit here, working out plots in his mind and sipping an Irish drink. As he sat in the chair by the fireplace, he realized that he was desperately sleepy. The packing, the journey, and the changes had tired him out quite a bit. Having made the bed with new linen, Hunter, without undressing, lay down on top of the blanket, and in a minute he fell into a deep sleep. He was awakened by the shouts coming from outside the house, which were not so loud, but they were clearly audible against the silence. Hunter thought that some unexpected guests had arrived, but he had not given his new address to anyone, precisely to avoid such visits. He got up, went out on the veranda and looked around. There was no one on the front lawn, only his car. The sun had long since set. The stars were burning brightly in the dark sky. Not illuminated here by the glow of the city lights, grasshoppers were chirping in the grass, which had not been heard during the day, and there were those cries again. Only now did he recognize their source. They were coming from the house opposite, from a room on the first floor, in the window of which the reddish light of a lamp was barely visible. Two people were arguing, a woman and a man. Hunter could not make out the words, but the raised tones indicated that the matter was moving toward a fight. That's the last thing we need. The agent claimed that the neighbors were hardly ever here and that he'd never seen them. What an asshole. Yes, his sentimental plans had been invaded by unexpected nuances that would somehow have to be reckoned with. Hunter went back into the house, took a beer out of the refrigerator, sat down at the desk, and opened his laptop. The Dickens family was a very ordinary American family, no better or worse than any other. He wrote and heard it loud and clear. And don't you dare meddle in my life again. I know it was you who killed. Hunter shuddered. From the last words of the phrase, his heart beat fast. The woman had said this on the street, apparently running out of that house. Then there was the sound of a car door slamming shut, the muffled roar of a running engine, and the rustle of tires scattering gravel. Hunter looked at his watch, 1:30. He sat a little by the fireplace with a beer, thinking about something far from the vicissitudes of the planned novel. At 3 o'clock the electronic alarm clock beat, startling him and bringing him back to reality again, having forgotten to turn it off. In the city, Hunter was always up at 3 a.m., while everyone who could disturb him was still asleep. He had until 8 a.m. to jot something down on paper, and at 8 a.m. his secretary would come in and take it away. After the death of his wife, he continued to get up on the alarm clock, inwardly resisting the changed circumstances. He took paper, but except for scribbling crossed-out paragraphs, he could not get anything out. Resistance was useless. It only took away the last strength from the creative process. The secretary Stella also came at first, waited silently for an hour, not wanting to somehow announce her presence, and also quietly disappeared, realizing that there would be no work for her again, and after a month she quit. Although Hunter continued to pay her salary regardless of whether or not she had a workload. The alarm clock kept ringing at 3 o'clock, and Hunter, like a ghost who had lost his memory, habitually sat down at his desk and played the role of a writer until 8 o'clock. The first night in the new place did not bring any special results. 4 pages of confused text, full of stylistic and semantic errors. On the second and third night, the screams from the neighbors only intensified. They lasted from 12 to 4 a.m. and ended the same way. The woman would shout one last catchy phrase, slam the car door, and run off somewhere else. Work on the book stalled again. In the morning after the third sleepless night, Hunter decided to visit the restless couple and have a serious talk with them. After all, he had every right to make his claims against them. The law has not yet been abolished, even if we take into account that on the site of the lake, there were only one neighbor. But when the doorbell rang, no one from the house came out. He tried peering in and knocking on the windows, but they were tightly curtained. The two-story building showed no signs of life. It was also surprising that the car the woman used to leave each time never appeared on the only road leading into town. That road was clearly visible from Hunter's window, but there was no other way for Hunter to leave this forest edge with the two structures anywhere nearby. It was unclear how the car had managed to drive off the property without escaping his attention. Returning back in the evening, he hadn't seen her either. Maybe it had happened during the day while he was asleep. Today he sat out on the veranda until just before sunset on purpose, trying to spot any sign of movement on the neighboring property, but all was quiet, just as it had been the first day he'd been here. There was only the flutter of a curtain in a first-floor window, as if someone had glimpsed a glimpse and then disappeared. At night, however, the same pattern was repeated, the shouting, the clatter of falling chairs, the clinking of dishes. It even seemed that another voice, a child's, had joined the duet. Hunter couldn't take it anymore and called the police. "Captain Jones, is this it? Hello." Trying to speak calmly and evenly began Hunter. "I'd like to report a disturbance. My neighbors have been making a lot of noise for the fourth night in a row. Can you give me the address, please? It's a lake. I don't know the address yet. I've recently settled here, but there are only 2 houses in the whole neighborhood. Mine and those rowdy neighbors. So I know where it is, but do you live in a smaller house or a 2-story? The smaller one, I only have a loft. And the screams are coming from the 2-story. Well, accordingly, there was silence on the other end. Hello?" Hunter said loudly, "Are you still there? Can you hear me?" Yes, I can." "And you were talking to the former owner of the house. About what?" Hunter was a little surprised at the question about anything. "Did he tell you anything about the house? The agent handled the purchase. I only talked to him. And what does that matter?" "I see." Sighing, Captain Jones said, "Understand what?" Hunter was already starting to get annoyed by the strange logic of the conversation. "Are you sure?" In the same vein, continued the captain, "That is not some tourists." "What tourists? This is a private area. There are no tourists here. A woman is arguing with a man, and today I also heard a child's voice. The light is on in the window of the first floor. Why would a tourist go into someone's house and yell at the whole neighborhood?" That's right. The captain agreed. "Okay, we'll figure it out. So you're coming? How are you going to deal with it? Because the neighbors are not there during the day. Right now, we have all the cars involved. There's a little trouble in town. An interception plan has been announced, but don't worry, as soon as we get a chance, we'll take action. And I would still advise you to talk to the former owner of the house." Hunter disconnected the connection and threw the cell phone on the table without even saying goodbye. Some strange captain, after thinking for a while, dialed the agent's number. "Hunter, what's wrong?" The voice in the receiver sounded sleepy and slightly scared. Hunter looked at the clock. It was 2:00 in the morning. Dan completely forgot what time it was now. "Daniel, sorry to wake you up in the middle of the night. I just have one question for you." "Yes. Did you ever speak to the previous owner of this house?" Agent Daniel, he thought about it for a while. No, his kids handled the deed. Is there something wrong with the paperwork? No, there's just a hell of a thing going on with these neighbors. You said they wouldn't bother me, but they're fighting every night, and I can't wait to get back to town. Oh, I'm sorry, Hunter. I've never even seen them, and from what I could tell, it looked like it was supposed to be quiet. Believe me, I in no way meant to mislead you. Why are you asking about the previous owner? No reason. The police told me to talk to him. The police? But that's hardly possible, and they should know better. Why not? You see, Hunter, the previous owner is in a somewhat inadequate state at the moment, in an asylum. A year now, that's why the kids did the deal. It doesn't get any easier by the hour. Hunter said in a low voice. Okay, sorry again for waking you up. Good night. It's nothing, Hunter, it's my job, and you call me if you need anything, at any time as it suits you. I'll try to find out more about the neighbors. At 4 a.m. as it should be, the car engine roared and the neighbor's ghostly car, on an incomprehensible route, swept away. This time the woman shouted, "It will come back to you. Mark my words, it will." Hunter typed this on the laptop screen in large letters. He grinned in a sort of unnatural smile and left for the bedroom. The next night, Hunter, having managed to write 5 more pages of text, closed the laptop and looked at the clock 10 minutes past 1. He took the last bottle of beer out of the fridge and sat down by the fireplace, waiting for a new show in the neighbor's house. But the screams didn't start, and at 2 o'clock it was quiet, and at 3:30. It looked strange already. Hunter went to the window. The lamp on the first floor opposite was not burning either. Had they really gone away? Had the long-awaited peace and freedom? But before he could rejoice at such a thought, he noticed that in the windows of the second floor, light flickered, so could shine only a hand lamp, quickly moving the beam from corner to corner. This time it really could be either tourists or thieves. Should we call the police again? Hunter immediately discarded the idea. Useless. He took a heavy poker from the fireplace and decided to find out what was wrong with those damned neighbors. Normally such boldness was not Hunter's usual characteristic, but this time something made him risk it, something he couldn't explain to himself. The door to the neighbor's house was slightly ajar, and Hunter stepped cautiously inside, lighting the way with his cell phone flashlight. The first floor living room was almost empty, just a table, a huge antique mirror, a leather couch, and 3 chairs. It was all covered with a transparent tall cloth. It didn't look like anyone lived here permanently at all. But maybe the owners had disappeared today because they'd finished moving in, taking all their belongings with them. There was clearly someone walking around on the second floor, the lights still flickering randomly from side to side. Hunter walked up the narrow curving staircase to the left and turned off the flashlight on his phone. The source of the light that had attracted him was in one of the bedrooms. Hunter's heart beat faster and louder. He felt the blood rush to his face, his right hand gripping the handle of the poker to the point of pain. He entered the hallowed room and saw a man from the back, bent over and looking at something on the bed. "Hey!" Hunter's voice sounded so loud that he was startled by it himself. The man straightened up sharply and turned around, blinding Hunter with the beam of the flashlight. "What the hell?" he shouted. "Who are you? Who are you?" Covering his eyes with his palm, Hunter asked, "What do you want in someone else's house?" "Police Officer Clark." He introduced himself. "Are you the owner?" "Drop what's in your hand." When Hunter was able to look at the man, he saw a young man in a police uniform, but there was something not quite right about his official closet, something Hunter couldn't quite understand, but he noted it to himself. "I'm a neighbor," he said. I saw the light and came to see who was snooping around in the middle of the night. It's the third day I've been waiting for you. What's taking so long? What do you mean, waiting? The guy asked me again. I called the station. They said they'd take care of it. You're from the city, aren't you? From the city. But now, Hunter said, the owners have moved out, so it's too late for you. I used to come here a lot, and I've had complaints before. Oh, yeah. Yes, but it's been quiet for a while now. Yeah, I wouldn't say that. Hunter objected. It hasn't been quiet for me lately. Let's go outside, shall we? Let's go outside. They went out on the veranda, and it was already in full bloom outside. The police car in which the officer had come was parked at the far corner of the house. On the way here, Hunter hadn't even noticed it. The officer pushed his cap back and lit a cigarette, letting the smoke drift upward, squinting. Did you see that? He asked, pointing with his hand. The wire broke, so there's no light in the house. Did you have a strong wind the other day? Hunter looked in the direction he was pointing, the cable sagging in the leaves, a black ribbon against the maple trees. There was no wind. Hunter was surprised. Yesterday the lights were still on the first floor. You'd better call an electrician, or you're going to get a short circuit, and if there's a fire, it could get you. And Officer Clark gave Hunter a hard look. All right, I will. Thank you for coming. As they say, always on the lookout. The officer joked, carefully put out his cigarette butt with his shoe, and got into the car. Have a good day. What's your name? Hunter. Have a good day, Hunter. The older model Ford turned around and pulled onto the road. Hunter followed it with his eyes and only at the last moment noticed that on the side of the car in white letters on a blue stripe, it was written not police, but just service. Didn't have time to change it or what? He thought. He grinned to himself and went into the house. That night Hunter dreamed that he was running along a deserted night highway, feeling that his wife was in some kind of trouble, and the faster he ran, the more and more anxiety squeezed his racing heart. He no longer merely felt, but almost knew that it was so, that his wife was in danger. The road became progressively hotter until his bare feet began to sink into the loose asphalt, slowing his movements. Finally, he saw the raging flames of the fire ahead and heard Margaret screaming. She was crying for help and saying, "It will come back to you. Mark my words, it will." Hunter was almost already stuck in one place, unable to move, and there were only 10 meters to the burning car, inside which his wife was thrashing around. He stretched helplessly his hands and tried to say something in response, but his tongue did not obey him, and in front of the car, the secretary Stella and his wife's friend Melissa, with whom Hunter had had a short affair before the wedding, were running around. They were pouring gasoline from a canister, which made the flames grow even stronger, and then there was a deafening explosion, and the hot pieces of the car flew in different directions and, falling from a height, hit the ground unnaturally loudly. Hunter woke up. Someone was banging forcefully on the door. He jumped out of bed, tangled in the blanket that had fallen to the floor, and banged his head on the nightstand, cursing. He got up and, trying to move carefully, went to open the door. When he opened it, determined to scold the knocker for his overzealousness, he found no one at the door. But the knocking had been going on a second ago, hadn't it? The intruder could not have been so quickly out of sight. Hunter went out on the veranda and looked around. No, there was no one anywhere. Was the furious knocking a continuation of the dream? Quite possibly, considering that he had been mentally strained lately, especially on this night. What's a mental workout? To be honest, Hunter was close to a nervous breakdown, though he didn't want to admit it to himself. Hunter walked into the house, went into the kitchen, and opened the refrigerator. Dan, I'm out of beer. We'd have to go into town anyway, for groceries, an electrician, and the police station. Yeah, the police station was the place to go to say a few nice things to them and find out what was wrong with the previous owner of his house. The first thing he did was to stop by the station. The officer on duty wrote down his passport information, issued him a pass, and pointed out the office of Captain Jones, with whom Hunter had talked on the phone the first night. The captain, fortunately, was in attendance. Hunter knocked on the door and entered. "May I?" he asked politely. "Come in," replied the captain. He was a man in his 50s, with a bushy mustache, sparse hair on his head, and eyes that looked surprised all the time. "I'm Hunter. We spoke to you a few days ago on the phone about the noise from the neighbors at the lake house." The captain rolled his bulging eyes as if trying to recall the fact Hunter had mentioned, then closed them and rubbed his eyelids with his fingers. "Sorry," he said. "Intermittent proctosis. I wouldn't wish it on an enemy. It's from varicose veins in the eye socket. That's what the doctor says, but I'll tell you what it's from. All that paperwork you have to go through all day, that's the real cause. So what about your house? That's what I wanted to ask you." A little puzzled, Hunter said. "Right." The captain looked at him again in surprise. "Hunter, the lake house, yes, it was. So did you talk to the former owner?" "No, since that's not possible. He happens to be in a mental institution since some time." "Wow." This time the captain was really surprised. It was to be expected, though. "Why?" "Well, how can I tell you? At one time he also complained about the noise in the neighbor's house. I actually went there myself 4 times, when I was a junior officer. But the thing is, no one's lived in that house for 6 years. How's that?" Now it was Hunter's turn to round his eyes. Like this. The captain splashed his hands. "We all know the story here. It's strange that your agent didn't say anything about it. Although, of course, it has nothing to do with your house. To accuse agents in silence such sensitive information, there is no formal reason. What's the story? Can you explain it to me?" 6 years ago, the captain began. "One Christmas night, there was a tragedy, the reasons for which remain a mystery. The husband shot his wife and young son and hanged himself in his office on the first floor without even leaving a note, as is often the case in such cases. What was the reason for this was never found out. An officer was in charge of the case, but he had no time to investigate it to the end. He himself was killed in the line of duty, apprehending a prisoner who had escaped from the colony." "Wait," Hunter interrupted Captain Hunter. "You said Officer Clark?" "Yes. Does that name mean anything to you? But how is that possible?" "What?" "I saw this officer tonight with a flashlight checking out a neighbor's house." The captain leaned back in his chair and began to move his eyes around again. "I'm afraid," he said after a pause, "that you've been misled by someone. Officer Clark couldn't have been in that house that night. But I talked to him the same way I'm talking to you now, so why would I make anything up? Let's go over the facts again." The captain continued calmly. "No one has lived in that house you're talking about for 6 years. That's one. And Officer Clark hasn't been able to talk to anyone in the last 4 years because the dead can't talk to the living. That's 2. As far as I can see, these facts are irrefutable, and it makes no common sense to dispute them." So Hunter continued, "I'm either crazy or someone is trying to play games with me?" "You said it yourself." With an upward-pointing finger, the captain summarized, "I'd be more inclined to the second option, but I'm sorry, the story with the former owner of your house can confuse anyone, and considering that you, as far as I know, are a writer, You must have an excellent imagination, and the sleep of the mind, as you know, breeds monsters. Again, I'm sorry if my logic seems offensive to you, but I'm an investigator. I have to think in a completely different way than you do." Hunter was in a stupor, his thoughts rushing around in his head, pushing each other apart. Who could have played such a cruel joke on him? And most importantly, for what purpose? He had never had such desperate enemies before. He ruled out his own insanity at once. What does it have to do with being a writer? Can't writers think logically? They can think logically, maybe even better than investigators. The task of a writer, especially if he writes fiction, is to mislead the reader, to give him at the very beginning of false guidelines, so that until the very last page, he could not guess what, in fact, the whole trick of the events described. The writer is above logic, because logic is only a linear tool, and you have to solve systemic problems and dive into parallel connections, and therefore know what each cog in the mechanism of a tangled plot serves. No, he's not crazy. The tragedy that had happened to his wife, of course, had shaken his nerves, but he had come to the lake full of optimism, and the noise in the house was not a figment of his imagination, nor was today's conversation with the late Officer Clark. So Hunter spoke again. "After I called you, you never sent anyone out to the lake?" "No one." The captain shook his head reassuringly. "We're still in a state of emergency, and there's no cars available and no men. What am I supposed to do now?" Hunter waved his hands. "What do you mean?" "If, God forbid, something strange happens again, where should I go besides a psychiatrist? If anything seriously jeopardizes your life, then, of course, call the station. Otherwise, I'm afraid we can't help you. Not because I doubt your judgment, but because resources are limited, and when we get things sorted out, I'll send a man to look at the house if you like, but that won't be for a while." Hunter remembered. "I need to find an electrician somewhere in town. There's a broken wire in that house, hanging from a tree. It could short out." "A wire?" "Don't worry, it won't short out. The house has been blacked out for years." But Hunter wanted to talk about the light on the first floor, but immediately stopped, not wanting to continue the slippery subject. "Do you have any weapons?" Suddenly the captain asked. What kind of weapon?" "For self-defense." Jones clarified. "It could be tourists or treasure hunters snooping around abandoned houses, scare them, if anything." "No, I don't have any weapons." "Then I suggest you get one." Again, closing his eyes, said the captain, "In your situation, think useful. I don't have any documents to buy a weapon." "You at least buy a bat. Some tin cannot so frighten the hooligans as a good baseball bat. We got a store near the station, a gun store. You'll find something suitable. Don't tell them I told you that. Just keep it between us." "All right," Hunter replied and headed for the office. "I'll think about it." "Goodbye. Have a good day," said the captain, and again, as if nothing had happened, stared at his papers. Pensively wandering down the corridor of the station, Hunter noticed something unusual on the wall. Perhaps if he hadn't been so absorbed in his thoughts, he would have passed it by, but something in his subconscious seemed to nudge him and make him look at the wall. It was a board with pictures of people in police uniforms. At the top, in large gold letters, it said, "Our Heroes," and among the pictures, Hunter saw a familiar face. It was Officer Clark. Under the photo in small print, it said that he had died heroically on an operation to apprehend a dangerous criminal, having arrested him, but he himself had been mortally wounded. And yes, that was 4 years ago. It was a hot evening, and it was impossible to stay in the house. Hunter took chairs and 3 bottles of fresh beer to the veranda. sat down and carefully examined the neighbor's house, trying not to miss any movement that could happen there. But everything was quiet. The silence, as on the first day, was deafening. Only somewhere in the distance behind the wall of the forest, the voices of birds were heard too, apparently tired from the mercilessly scorching, all-day sun. Hunter leaned against the chair a bat, purchased in the store, and touched with his fingers its handle, wrapped in rough rubberized tape. The weapons on the counter were available for all tastes: combat, gas, blank charges, electroshock, even bows and crossbows, but all of them required, at least, a medical certificate, and for combat weapons also a hunting ticket. He had to choose a bat, as the captain advised, which was a rather formidable weapon, and unlike the same shocker, noticeable from afar. Hunter tried to imagine the consequences of a blow with this club, looking at not long, rounded at the end spikes, even for such a purchase had to show a passport. The seller carefully wrote down all the data on the receipt and looked at Hunter glumly, as if suspecting him of some evil intention. However, he said nothing in farewell, only nodded his graying head. How stupid it all is. Instead of writing a book, he had to think about who knows what. But it was an interesting situation. No one was able to help him either. Just like that family tormented by the poltergeist he'd conceived the novel about. At least the feeling of desperate helplessness and abandonment he will be able to describe truthfully, based on his fresh and more than real experience. If only Stella, the secretary, would come in the morning again, it would be more cheerful and less disturbing. But where was she now, this Stella? Probably he had forgotten about the unhappy writer, though they had in common not only pages written in small handwriting, but also something hotter. However, I did not want to remember about it, because at the death of his wife, this hot very quickly cooled down then. To hell with it. Just as Hunter thought of Stella, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello, hello, Hunter." A cheerful female voice sounded in the receiver. "Don't you recognize it?" There was something familiar in Hunter's intonation, but the thought of Stella confused him. "It's Melissa." Without waiting for an answer, the woman clarified the situation. "I changed my SIM card, so I'm calling all my old friends to tell them the new number. How are you? I haven't seen you in a while. Have you started writing?" It was Melissa, the late wife's girlfriend, the one with whom Hunter had a fleeting affair just before his wedding. I don't know why, but he was glad to see her, though he tried not to show it. "Yeah, I'm Melissa. In fact, you are like from the past life, while I was depressed. Time stretched slowly, but as if I came to my senses, and as if I woke up in a boat, but I have no weight, and I do not know how and where to go." "Well, I see," Melissa noticed. "Your imagination is all right, so you will live. And you too." Hunter objected. "Back where?" "It's about fantasy," Hunter clarified. "I had an unpleasant conversation with the captain today. He reproached me, as if by the way, for being too imaginative." "What captain?" "Are they still bugging you about the accident?" "No, it's something else." "What happened? Where the hell are you right now? I can hear the desperation in your voice now." "I've been out of town for 2 weeks. I bought a house by the lake, moved in for the summer to write a book." "Oh, come on. And I came by your place just a week ago, kissed your doorstep, and went home. And no one at the publisher's office is wondering where you've disappeared to. How's the book coming along?" Hunter was pleased to hear that not everyone has forgotten about him after all. Fans and acolytes were not counted. These on the wave of success, he will always be needed. One could hear that Melissa was now genuinely interested in him. To be honest, sighed into the tube, Hunter, the answer is negative. Nothing is written, And not because the ideas have dried up. There are ideas, but because my neighbors turned out to be crazy. Yes, and also existing, as the captain hinted, only in my imagination. You've had it rough, Hunter. What bad luck is and how to deal with it. Listen, of course, I will not impose my society on you, but just by the way, in the city it is so stuffy here, I was going just somewhere away from the asphalt to hide. I haven't figured out any special escape routes for myself. Maybe. Isn't that the big lake near the town of Vecta? Yeah, that's it. Hunter confirmed it. We used to compete there once. It's a deep lake, perfect for our sport. So what did you want to say about the trails? Hunter, if you need company, but for 2-3 days, I could make my route right through your dacha. I'm not insisting. It's just your voice, so I suggested it. Inwardly, Hunter was even excited by this suggestion. A close person, and even more so a woman, would be more convenient for him now than ever, but he had to pause before answering, so as not to give Melissa his hasty joy. Come, to hell with the book. I'll have time for it. No, Hunter. Melissa spoke up. I will not distract you from the book. You write as much as you want. I'll go snorkeling and sunbathing, and I'll take care of the household, if you let me, and we'll talk at sunset, and remember our best years. I'll be like a mouse. P. Hunter laughed. Come on, mouse, come on over. From our town to Vecta, about 70 kilometers, and from Vecta to the Lake 20, you'll get there in an hour and a half. I'm waiting. Well then, see you in the ambulance. I'll be on my way. I'm just getting gas. See you later. The thought of Melissa's imminent arrival gave Hunter some confidence and a desire to show some activity. He got up and, taking his bat with him, went to take another look at the neighbor's house before going inside. He checked the perimeter once more, assuming the presence of ghosts. Although it was frightening and popped into his head, he still didn't agree. There had to be a rational explanation for everything. Strange stubbornness for a man writing about poltergeists. But maybe the most stubborn of the nationalists, the most fearful of everything otherworldly and without logical support. So perhaps they protect their sanity from a breakdown. And this time we managed to find something. The low shrubbery, shaggy and killed by wild ivy, at the far corner of the house had one oddity. If in other places maples began immediately behind it, in one between it and the trees there was a space of 4 meters. Hunter crouched down and poked his bat into a tangle of branches, the bat hitting something hard. He pulled the branches apart with his hands, and there it was. Behind the bush was a piece of wooden fence, painted green, and 2 hooks, dressed in hinges on 2 posts, between which there was a distance of 3 meters. Getting it off the hinges was not particularly difficult for Hunter. It was not so heavy due to the fact that the bushes seemed artificial. At first glance, however, it was impossible to distinguish them from the real ones, and Hunter saw a barely traveled road descending the hill on which the house stood and disappearing among the spruce trees. But what did the neighbors need this secret path for? Strange, though it was much easier to accept than a car disappearing into the night without a trace. Determined to find out everything to the end, Hunter followed the road, wanting to find out where it led. The road looped briefly through the woods, and after about 10 minutes of walking, it turned sharply to the right at the lake. So, the main route along the high shore on the left, it never came out, going around the lake in the opposite direction. Everything became clear with this. Now maybe we could find something interesting inside the house as well. In the daylight, the interior did not look so neglected. The furniture tucked away under tulle or plastic sheeting, alternating with objects that were not protected from the dust settling on them. Hunter ran a finger along the antique dresser. Yes, the place hadn't been cleaned in months. In the cramped hallway leading to the dining room, however, an ancient pendulum clock was running smoothly, only 7 minutes behind the correct time. It had been started recently, for the weight on the chain had barely traveled half of its proper distance. In the dining room, Hunter found on the floor a tin bowl of food for an animal, maybe a small dog or a big cat. Drinking water had not had time to evaporate from another bowl, signs of someone's recent presence alternating oddly with desolation. After checking the second floor, Hunter went down to the first floor again and reached the study where the lamp burned at night. He tried to open the door, but it was locked, the only room he couldn't get into, and it was interesting. He kicked the lock as hard as he could, and the door opened. Not a courteous gesture on his part, but he couldn't do otherwise. He was too sore from the trouble he'd been having lately. There weren't many things in the office. A desk, armchairs, and cabinets with books and files along 3 walls. The window was tightly shuttered, and on the desk was the same lamp with the red, Chinese-style shade that had been burning earlier, despite the lack of electricity in the house. Hunter tried to turn it on. No, granted, it didn't work. He strolled along the racks of books, looking at the titles on the spines. Walter Scott, Dostoevsky, Stephen King, books on astrology, a complete mix of genres and tastes of whoever had assembled this collection. And suddenly Hunter Wilson, Sun Over the City. Why is this here? Next to his latest novel were other, earlier novels and short stories, a complete collection such as even he himself did not have. 8 volumes, what a turn! Were the screaming owners of this house among his most loyal fans? Hunter picked up the Sun Over the City and opened the front. Across it, in large, curlicue letters, it said, "Dear Kathy, in kind remembrance from the author." It was his handwriting, his autograph. Apparently, a fan named Kathy not only liked to read it, but also did not miss meetings with readers, of which Hunter had dozens in the last year. Of his acquaintances, he didn't have anyone named Kathy, a name he would surely remember. Suddenly the phone rang, and the book fell out of Hunter's hands. He looked at the screen. It was the agent calling. "Yes, Daniel, hello." "Hunter, good evening." "Good evening. I'm calling about your neighbors. Can you talk now?" "Yes, go ahead. I've managed to find out a few things, if you're still interested." "Sure, I got some details about them too." "Yes, what kind of details?" "Turns out they were fans of mine. At least one of them was. The library I found in the house has my complete works. Can you believe it?" "You broke into the house?" Daniel asked excitedly. "It's not locked, and no one has lived in the house for a long time." "That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about," the agent began. "The owner of the house, one John Parker, as it turned out, he died 6 years ago. I assure you, I knew nothing about that or the tragedy that took place in the house." "Yeah, I'm aware of that." Agent Hunter was reassured, "and I have no beef with you." But more than that, Daniel interrupted him and immediately paused for a moment. How to put it? "You, Hunter, had something to do with that tragedy." "Me?" "Not personally, of course, but indirectly through my books. It's not your fault, of course, but nevertheless. Kathy, John's wife, was an ardent admirer of yours, never missed a meeting, and no publication escaped her notice. She would sometimes ask her husband to fill in for her at an autograph session if she couldn't attend for some reason. She probably fell asleep with your book in her hands. In general, her husband began to suspect that she is looking for with you not only reading contact, but counting on something more." "In what sense?" "In the sense that her husband suspected her of cheating on him." "What the hell is that?" I think, Daniel pointed out, it happens to women, and their idols often go out of their way to meet such fans. I'm sorry, I don't mean you at all, but you do realize that women take literature too personally, transferring the characteristics of their characters onto the author. I don't know what the poor woman's feelings were, but her irrepressible passion for reading led to what happened on Christmas night. A nightmare. I don't want to go into all the details again. I guess if you know something, you know it too. But it takes your imagination to imagine the chain of events that went down like that, Hunter. How did you even find out about this? Talk to the former owner of your house. In the psych ward. That's right. I took the trouble to go and see him. He's not that crazy. I'll tell you that much. He was aware of the whole thing. At one time, he had a very close relationship with the neighbors, but when things got heated between the couple, he didn't want to be friends anymore. I don't know. It seemed to me that he had a thing for Kathy. He spoke of her with a special piety. It was like he had a premonition of this kind of ending. He said that John had been completely insane since the fall and all through the early winter before Christmas. He'd gone off the rails, as they call it. They had a big fight. Kevin from the asylum, the one who lived in your house, even managed to buy the only road into town and forbade John to use it. He had to take a detour to Vecta, across the lake. That's all I've been able to dig up. Very valuable information, said Hunter. Thank you very much, Daniel, for doing this work. Don't mention it, Hunter. I've missed some important details myself, so I'll learn a lesson. And as for the noise you mentioned, the culprits are to be found elsewhere. You understand that the former owners have nothing to do with it, unless by will their house passed to some of the heirs, but in this direction my searches did not yield any results. Here it is necessary to involve some lawyers. Got it. Hunter summarized. Thank you again. If there is anything new, be sure to call me. I will. Hunter put the phone away, picked up the fallen book from the floor, and opened the autographed page again. The story with the neighbors might now be quite complete, if it weren't for one thing, but huge letters throbbed in his head. How could he sign Kathy's book this year? If she and her husband had died 6 years ago, who had been faithfully adding to the collection in the abandoned house all those 6 years anyway? And the screams he heard at night were not hallucinations, a man and a woman arguing, and a baby crying. Clarity, by and large, in the whole affair was not added. Dragging the bat along the ground, Hunter walked back to his house, and it was only as he crossed the road that he noticed the light green Nissan nestled behind his Mazda. On the veranda sat Melissa and smiled. Well, hello there, Ryder, she said cheerfully. Were you hunting a mammoth? How pleasant her voice sounded, in the midst of this ominous evening silence. Hello, friend, he answered, went up to the veranda to the guest and kissed her on the lips. You don't know what mammoths are here sometimes. Your weapons are formidable. Pointing to the bat, Melissa said. That's all I'm supposed to have. Melissa rummaged in her purse and took out a small, shiny gun. I have something too, she said. Jesus, Hunter exclaimed. We got a whole gang here now. What do you need a gun for? Did you think I turned into a maniac and hold hostages in the basement? Melissa laughed. No, it's just that your voice on the phone seemed to me a little frightened. And now I see that I did not just think that. It's not a combat one. It's a starter. I brought it with me from one of the competitions. I don't dive now. My breathing is not the same. But sometimes they call me to judge, so it's my weapon of choice. It makes a hell of a lot of noise, scares even a bear away. Too bad you're not competing anymore, said Hunter. I remember when you could hold your breath for 5 minutes. Has your record been broken yet? Not in the state yet, but in the world I've never even come close. It's fantastic minutes out there. Free divers have been going over 10 minutes for a long time. For me, it's just out of the realm of fantasy. Surprised Hunter. Have they learned to stop the heart like you? That's your trick. I remember it particularly well. Come on. Melissa waved her hand. Where can I get to these tricks now? I'm an old woman. I can't compete with young people now. But I remember you exactly as you are, and you haven't changed a bit, as you were a beauty, and you still are. I must have gotten old. I've gone gray, said Melissa, stroking Hunter's hair. So unusual, but gray hair suits you. Somehow you've grown up even. Why isn't your car in the garage? I went in the garage, but I couldn't get the door open. Is it true that there's a maniac at night? It's filled to the ceiling with old stuff. I couldn't get my hands on the car. Let's go inside. You must be hungry. We'll fix you a light supper. Come on. With Melissa in the house, time passed quickly for Hunter. Even the ghosts seemed frightened by her presence. Not once over the next 7 days, no more disturbing screams, creaks, or the red lamp in the window across the street. Hunter again began waking at 3 a.m., and until 8 a.m., he modeled the paper with an unstoppable stream of plot twists for the novel. He transferred his benevolence even to the most fierce of his heroes, Poltergeist. It turned out that the noisy spirit simply had unrequited feelings for the daughter of a long-suffering family who did not want to play with him and in every way avoided his attention. The spirit even thought of interrupting his ghostly existence from the excess, not divided feelings, and gave the girl a way to get rid of him once and for all. And the girl was about to do it when she suddenly realized that it was wrong, that Poltergeist is just a wild, unbridled creature, longing to be loved and needed, that he also deserves to get the opportunity to go to the side of the world. And well, Hunter himself was surprised at this direction of his thoughts. According to the original plan, the novel was to be a denunciation of human cowardice and duplicity, when the created public good is possible only within the framework of relative well-being, the benefactors themselves, but only a real danger to overstep the personal boundaries of good-hearted citizens, as they immediately grow thorns, detaching themselves from the situation and caring only about themselves. Melissa liked the new plot much better. Between swimming at the lake and cooking lunches, she took over as Stella's secretary, reprinting text from paper onto the monitor screen. She was slow at it, but Hunter was glad she was. The novel was nearing completion, and in any case he had time to send it to the publisher before September, who, to his credit, had stopped bothering him with endless hints of pressing deadlines. But if the paper feelings had come closer to their finale, the real feelings that had settled in this house with Melissa's arrival were only gaining momentum. Their fleeting connection from the past had taken on new colors. They were now both moderately wise, moderately passionate, and moderately able to account for their actions, and there was nothing to prevent their intimacy from being platonic to bodily a few days later. Enough time had passed since the death of Margaret's wife, and Melissa, as far as Hunter could understand, had not had a steady partner in the city since their separation. It seemed to Hunter that things were finally getting better in his life. The appearance of Melissa in the house, he took it as a reward for the recent agony. It was still unclear how, for example, the meeting with the non-existent Officer Clark had come to seem like a dream. Why? His nerves were so tense that he could dream anything and mistake it for reality. He wasn't just thinking about it, he was convincing himself of it, as if he were living in the image of a madman walking along the border separating illusion from reality. People tend to convince themselves that something didn't really happen in their past, or if they did, it was different in some way, with nuances that could justify them. They are not villains or crazy. They have all read children's fairy tales. They know where good and bad are. They are just weak at times, as if weakness justifies any mistake. The doubts, driven to the bottom of his soul, scraped unpleasantly from the creek, giving Hunter a noise in his head, and only when he took paper in his hands and began to write, the noise subsided, giving way to other people's emotions, becoming for 5 hours as if they were his own. On one such morning at 8:30, when Hunter had set his novel down, he went out on the veranda, smiling absent-mindedly and to the end, not believing in the successful completion of his work. The heat, even on the morrow, was unwilling to abate. The windows open in the house did not save from the stuffiness, and the cold beer the body could no longer fit. Hunter went to his favorite chair and saw some postcard, so it seemed to him. Maybe in his heart he was waiting for congratulations from all parts of the country. He took it in his hands, looked at it, and his heart sank into his heels. No, not this again. What the hell? Why now? It can't be like this. It was a photograph of his late wife's car engulfed in flames. A photograph from the scene of the very accident that had divided his life into before and after, and which he had been trying not to think about all this time, trying to scratch out of his memory like he scratched out bad bits of text from a novel. On the back of it, as if written by a 5-year-old child, "Mark my words, he'll be back." Cold sweat broke out on his forehead, his hands trembled, and it felt like it was -40, not +20 outside. Hunter, as if in a dream, went back into the house, took a pair of scissors out of the drawer, and began to angrily cut up the photograph, putting the scraps in a neat pile on the table. Melissa came out of her bedroom and stared at him fearfully for over a minute. "Hunter," a little audibly she said. "Hunter, what's wrong with you? What are you doing? Are you all right?" He looked at her uncomprehendingly, grinned half his face in a smile, and said, "They know everything." "Who do they?" "Know what?" "They know everything," Hunter repeated. "They won't leave me alone." "What do I do, Margaret?" "Hunter, come to your senses. I am Melissa." "What are you talking about? Melissa?" For a second, Hunter's eyes became clear. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, yes, Melissa, I need to." "I'll be right there. Don't go. I'll be right there." And Hunter rushed out of the house, got into his car, pushed the gas pedal to the floor, and sped down the road to town. It seemed to him that the car was going too slowly, as if a whole carload of passengers had been hitched to it from behind, and he had to get there in time. In time for what? Where to? As if someone was calling him, but the name and the place of meeting did not tell him. A wooden sign hung on a chain flashed to the right. A road to the city. Strange. Apparently some joker had ordered it to be installed here. He hadn't noticed it before. He looked in the side mirror and saw the sign again. His thoughts were all jumbled up in his head, all sorts of nonsense that he couldn't handle. No matter how he turned that sign either way, it read like a road to the city, a palindrome. And therefore there was no road that could lead him to a life-saving goal. The target was approaching and distant at the same time. He hit the brakes as hard as he could. The car skidded to the left, the gravel slamming into the bottom of the car. Stop! When the dust cloud cleared, Hunter saw the lake glistening in the sunlight ahead of him. The front wheels froze in centimeters from the cliff. His whole body shuddered with chills. He was seized with horror. Carefully, matching every movement, Hunter shifted into reverse and pulled back onto the road. Then he turned left, into the woods, where there was a slightly visible rut. He drove another 100 meters and stopped. As he struggled to unbuckle his seatbelt, He jumped out of the car, ran to a tree as if the car was about to explode. He crouched down, hiding behind the trunk, took a breath, and immediately fell into his memories, into the pieces of it that had once been carefully kicked out of his head. In the month before Margaret's tragedy, their relationship had deteriorated to the point where it was hard to imagine how these people had once genuinely loved each other. They had not spoken to each other for many days, and his wife had filed for divorce, unable to bear Stella in their house, nor her husband's completely depraved character. His sunshine over the city could not end. He was furious. Everything irritated him. Hysterics followed hysterics. Poor Stella, who had fallen in love with Hunter, was caught between two fires. On the one hand, Margaret's sizzling jealousy, and on the other, the unbridled passion of Hunter, who did not realize reality. It was as if the house had been booby-trapped and was about to blow up. The house that belonged to Margaret, in case of divorce, Hunter would lose everything. He would become a bum for no one. Not yet favored, neither by his publisher nor by the reading public. At that time, he was not yet the Hunter Wilson known at the top of the literary world. He was a nobody. Only the sun over the city could move things forward. Hunter felt it. He knew it, as any relatively talented creator knows everything about his creation before it is finally released. He needed only a month of concentrated work, only a month, but it was as if the monster was devouring the time, leaving him not a minute. Hunter had no car of his own, and he had never learned to drive. Sometimes he used his wife's car when there was an urgent need to go somewhere. That day he was going to the city too, and he didn't even remember now for what purpose. The brakes went bad. He decided not to put it off in a long box and went to a car service. That's where it happened. A stray thought, a fleeting anger that created a monster in his heart. The mechanic looked at the brake system, whistled, and said that fateful phrase. "Another day and you'd be in the morgue for sure." Is it that serious? How much more serious could it be? Answered the mechanic and tapped the wheel with the key. "I'm afraid I can't do it in one day. You come back tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll tell you the exact time and price." Where was he in such a hurry? Completely slipped my mind. Doesn't matter what he's attached to it. What does it matter? He had to admit to himself that the reason for his decision was not the need to go somewhere, but the simple thought that there was no need to fix the brakes now. No need. Hunter was already standing at the bus stop when it hit him. He went back to the service and took the car back, saying he would be back tomorrow, but he never came back. He got home, never got to where he was going, quietly put the car in the garage, and with a sinking heart, sat down to finish the remaining pages. Stella was finishing typing the last of the sheets she had. The work was going well. He was calm. Peace spread over his whole body in a hot spill. He smiled and wrote well, splendidly, and at the same time enjoyed the half-realized premonition, the imminent finale of a difficult head and in his own life. He knew how everything would happen, as if he were watching a movie that had already been released and in which it was now impossible to change a single scene. As if playing his part, he made another scandal in the evening. Stella ran out of the house in tears. Margaret shouted some insults, the most harmless of which was to denounce him as mediocre. He's talentless? Let's see what she says to that, if she can speak at all. Hunter answered Margaret as if with a memorized text, and calmly watched her hatred turn into an uncontrollable outburst devoid of any objective meaning. It was past midnight. She too ran out in tears, got into her car, and drove away into the hazy haze of distant city lights. He knew she would never come back. There was no sign for the road to the city. It was a one-way trip only. That was it. Now he could breathe fully. He admitted it to himself. He was ready to move on. Yes, he'd thought about those Dan breaks. He'd wanted to, but they were just thoughts. Little pulses in his brain running back and forth along the neurons, and nothing more. A wish. How many desires don't a person have? He didn't mess with the breaks. He never even laid a finger on Margaret. He just saw more than the others. But that's why he's a brilliant writer. To be able to see such things, it's his gift from birth. After all, it's her car, and it's up to her to see to its condition. To hell with regret. To hell with doubt. To hell with all those feeble-minded people who made a spectacle of the dead policeman, with the books signed supposedly for Kathy, with the shouting of non-existent neighbors, with the picture of this one at last. He'll sue them too, if he has to, and he'll stomp them into the dirt. Let them try it again, you fools. Hunter came back, didn't explain anything to the confused. In a second, Hunter, who was soaking wet, ran into the house, and at the next flash saw Melissa's body sprawled on the floor in the hall. Looking around and finding no one around, Hunter ran up to her and shook her by the shoulder. "Melissa?" he shouted. "What happened? Are you all right?" There was another flash, and Hunter saw that the woman's head was smashed and lying in a pool of thick blood. "Melissa!" he screamed, but the woman didn't move or respond, and he tried to feel for a pulse on her neck, then on her wrist. Where was it, that pulse? Dan, there was no way he could detect it, but the body was still warm. The light flashed again, and Hunter's hair on his head stirred. Next to Melissa lay his bat, also bloody, and in his right hand, the woman clutched her shiny pistol that she had been bragging about. What was going on here? Why had she gone into this house alone? Why didn't she wake him up? Lightning had already incessantly illuminated the neighborhood. Hunter could now clearly see the whole picture, and just as clearly he realized that Melissa was dead, and next to her was his bat, which her head had been smashed against. We should call the police or an ambulance. Now where do we call? Hunter rushed back to his house, found his cell phone, began to dial the number with trembling fingers, and suddenly froze. What was he doing? What the hell are the police doing? All the evidence points to him. It's his bat, his fingerprints. And this is the house that's been driving him crazy for a long time. Who's gonna believe him after he told us about the ghost of Officer Clark and the ghost killers? Captain Jones would only roll his eyes, convinced that the writer, as he supposed, had driven himself into a frenzy and rattled the unfortunate woman who had risked comforting him. No, and no again. Something else is needed here. Like then? Like then? What about the car? No one suspected. His affair was over. He had a new success waiting for him. You can't just cut everything out of your life. Hunter took Melissa's breathless body in his arms and carried it to the car. Then he went back for the bat and threw it far into the woods. He would sort it out afterwards. Now the main thing was to get rid of the body. The rain was pouring down. Nothing could be seen 5 meters away. Could the real killer be following him right now? Even if he was, he wouldn't be able to see anything unless he risked a face-to-face confrontation, and then he'd have all the anger Hunter had built up inside him. It's a good thing it's raining like this. He can do it fast. He'll come back, clean up the blood in the house. No one will come to visit him in this weather. No one has seen Melissa here either. No one knows she was here, even if she was on her way to see him. So what? She just got caught in a downpour, lost control, and slid off the road into the lake. Daniel had warned her that the road could be dangerous in the rain. It would all look natural. Carefully pressing the gas, the hunter drove to the lake shore. The wipers could not cope with the flow of water. The high beam only reflected from countless drops and blinded his eyes. And in this maelstrom, the stupid sign, "The Road to Town," came into view again. Hunter stopped and got out of the car, already thinking how best to push it down. Suddenly there were lights everywhere, side, front, and back. Bright spotlights flashed and a siren wailed. From the mouthpiece came a loud voice, ominously emphasized by the roll of thunder. "Hunter Wilson, step away from the car and get on your knees, or we will open fire." Captain Jones sat opposite and stared unblinkingly at the wet, from head to toe Hunter. The interrogation room was small, deceptively cozy, but built according to all the rules of the genre. A table with handcuffs, soundproof walls, wide tinted glass, behind which on this side there was nothing to see, but on the other side there was someone standing there, hearing and seeing everything, seeing and hearing all the nonsense Hunter had been talking for half an hour. "Then you insist that you did not kill Melissa?" The captain repeated calmly. "No, I told you. I heard a shot and ran to that house. Why would I kill her? Why would you kill your own wife?" "What?" Hunter exclaimed. This question came out of the blue, like a hammer hitting him on the head. "What are you talking about? What's my wife got to do with it?" "You know what it has to do with her." Jones persisted. "You were wrong to think that the case would be written off as an accident. The investigation has been going on all this time, and there is a witness." "What witness?" "I don't understand you." "You understand everything, Hunter, except maybe one thing. I don't think you realized how close friends Melissa and your wife were. Melissa knew all about your complicated relationship and that you'd driven your wife to hysterics. Margaret went to Melissa's that night, and now you've eliminated a witness." "A fight? Melissa confronted you?" "You lured her into a neighbor's house and hit her over the head with a bat." "No." No, Hunter yelled. "I didn't kill her and she didn't say anything to me." Oui. "Yeah, that's bullshit." "Yes, I may have wanted Margaret dead, and I may have known the brakes were bad, and I may not have wanted them fixed at the service station, and I may have driven away in a bad car, but I had nothing to do with Melissa's death. So maybe you did or knew." "There's a big difference." "Yes, I did. And I had this picture of the accident in my mind, and I wanted it to happen." "Are you satisfied? Is that enough of my confession for you?" "But I didn't kill Melissa. That's crazy." "Yes, Hunter," the captain agreed. Delusions of your disturbed mind. You may not have killed Melissa, but you didn't kill Margaret. The problem is that you yourself ruined the brakes on your wife's car, and you convinced yourself that the brakes were defective through no fault of your own. Especially the car service said they never saw you in their eyes, and on the security cameras, your car was never there. You are a writer. Your inflamed mind has convinced you that you are not guilty of anything, and the brakes you ruined are supposedly an accident. But you screwed up on the most basic of things. You always write everything down in your diary. It's a habit of yours, and Melissa knew it all too well because she was in a relationship with you before you married Margaret. She had a year-long hunch that you were at fault, and she came to us to find out for sure. Melissa was convinced of her rightness when she read your confession in your diary about killing your wife. But now I assure you, you will feel better. You will finally understand yourself. Tomorrow we'll talk to you again. We'll discuss some details. But for now, I ask you to sign a non-departure order. We're reopening the criminal case. You'll have to write your novels behind bars if your guilt is proven in court. You will pardon us for this spectacle with both the house and Melissa, but any murder, as you know from your detectives, must be solved, and the criminal must receive a just punishment." Hunter looked at the captain and did not know what to say to him in reply. Yes, now he really realized what had happened a year ago to his wife. Hunter had convinced himself then that it was for the best if he wrote this scenario for himself. No guilt, no remorse. And he really believed that everything had happened by accident. His brain had simply forgotten that he had self-destructed his wife. But Melissa, what happened to her? And what play was the captain talking about? At that time, there were two people on the other side of the window, Melissa, alive and well, and a young officer who looked a lot like Clark, especially if you looked at him in the dim light. "Congratulations, Melissa," he said quietly. "I thought this show would never end. You shouldn't be a diver, but a movie star. He didn't even think you were just playing a part. Give it up." Finishing her cigarette, Melissa replied, "No one will ever get Margaret back anyway, and the bastard will get out of it one way or another. He became a popular writer. He has connections. Right, officer?" "It's hard to say now," the man shrugged. "Jones will work with him. He knows what he's doing. Thanks for coming to us with your idea. For a captain, it's the last thing on his mind. I'm sure he'll want to retire as a major, but in any case, that writer Hunter Wilson has to answer for the murder of his wife to the fullest, and we'll see how it goes in court."
Subscribe and click the bell.
"You're 5 years old. Daughter, congratulations," Mom exclaimed, entering the living room, where at the festive table gathered all the relatives, headed by the birthday girl. In her hands she held a huge cake, on which burned 5 candles. "Well, come on, my girl, make the most cherished wish and try to overnight all the candles," pronounced Daddy, hugging the girl by the shoulders. "I want." She thought for a second and looked around at everyone present. "I want that we never parted," loudly said the girl and almost whispered added. "And also this beautiful doll that we saw in the store." "This one?" asked the grandmother, and, opening the closet, took out the very doll that Evelyn had recently seen in the store and squeezed her mother's ears. What a big and beautiful toy it was, and how Evelyn would like it. But then her mother had been adamant, noting that they wouldn't spend that much money on such an expensive toy. Seeing the gift, little Evelyn was confused at first. She froze in place and looked at the doll and at her grandmother. "I still can't believe what is happening." "Honey, you're not happy?" Grandpa asked. "Why are you frozen? Birthday wishes should always come true." Evelyn smiled and clapped her hands in delight. She ran up to her grandmother and held out her arms in anticipation of the gift. When the cherished doll was in her arms, she looked at her grandparents and whispered, "Grandma and Grandpa, you are the best in the world. Cindy and David, next time, consult with us before you give such expensive gifts. Are you spoiling Evelyn?" and admonished the pensioners in a disgruntled voice, the mother of the birthday girl. "And I don't think we should indulge a girl's every whim." But her husband's parents disagreed. "Maria, who else should we spoil?" Grandpa stepped in. "Who knows what will happen tomorrow and how long we have left? And what's wrong with a child to be happy? Especially she is our only granddaughter," added the mother-in-law. Evelyn was used to such conversations. She paid no attention to these words because all her thoughts were already in the yard with her favorite doll. The girls would burst with envy. "No one has such a thing," reflected, smiling girl. Maria sighed heavily. She had nothing to say. She lived here on a bird's license. Her mother-in-law ran the apartment. Maria had met William at a friend's party 8 years ago. The guy fell in love with her, and as they say, at first sight. At that time, Maria had a young man whom she dreamed of marrying. But only this young man had completely different priorities. As he himself told her more than once, he hadn't piled on yet. What was the point of rushing into it? Maybe we're not right for each other, he explained to her while he looked around. "Actually, I'm 21. Maria insisted. "It's time for a family and kids. Why procrastinate? Especially since we've been together for 2 years. But he ignored all her arguments. Maria was angry, but she was patient and waited. Suddenly, she was invited to a birthday party in a tomb. There were a lot of people at the party, and William was among them. He immediately attracted attention. The girl stood out too much from the crowd, despite the fact that he was tall, handsome, polite, and expensively dressed, which spoke of his rather financial condition. But for all that, he was very shy. But even his modesty did not prevent him from asking Maria out on a date. And on the second date, he asked her to marry him. Maria was well aware that she had no feelings for him, but she really wanted to take revenge on her ex. Therefore, without thinking, she gave her consent. And in a month and a half, the girl stood in the registry office, in white, and mind-blowing wedding dress. Everything as it should be. Then a motorcade of several cars drove them around the city, and all the girlfriends were bursting with envy. Yes, Maria, you're lucky to get a guy with money and an apartment. Yeah. Well, what are you gonna do with your parents? They're not forever. But in the center of the city, you'll live like Christ at your side, they told each other. After the ceremony, the newly wedded couple flew to the sea and a whole week enjoyed the sound of the surf and basked under the hot sun on the hot white sand. Maria was over the moon with happiness, but the euphoria quickly passed and the reality remained. Back home, they plunged headlong into everyday cares. William was at work all day long. Maria was finishing her degree in knitwear. The spouses saw each other only at breakfast and dinner when William came home. But Maria was satisfied with this state of affairs. Finishing her studies, she met every day with her girlfriends. Did they gossip in cafes or sing karaoke? She met her ex a couple times. He held the hand of his new party and pretended not to even know Maria. His indifference was a terrible blow to the girl's ego. And she vowed to herself, "In spite of you, I'll be the happiest woman in the world." The young couple lived in the center of the city in a two-bedroom with William's parents. The apartment, of course, was not huge, but there was plenty of space. The big room was given to the young, and in the smaller one, the owners themselves organized. My mother-in-law continued to run the household, and Maria was very happy about it. "You have your whole life ahead of you to prepare and clean," Maria's mother-in-law kept saying. "Children will go quickly. All you learn to cook and wash and iron. And while there is time, enjoy life." Maria liked this life very much. After graduating from technical school with a specialty, she decided not to go anywhere and went to work as a clerk in the nearest store to the house. Paid, of course, a little, but it was enough for little girls. Weekends she went with her friends to the disco, periodically acquired. William did not say a word to her. He himself was happy to see his young wife happy and satisfied, and his friends couldn't stop admiring him. You could only dream of such a thing. They talked about William. He doesn't limit anything, doesn't reproach anything, doesn't forbid anything, doesn't yell Maria. Should you carry him in your arms? Oh no, he should thank all the gods that I met on his way. Laughed the young woman in response. Few people would agree to live with a mother-in-law and mother-in-law. "Come on, your mother-in-law is a saint," exclaimed back her friends. "On such a one only pray." "Well, then pray," parried Maria. "I'd rather live separately, but it's probably more convenient for my William." With sadness in her voice, cried the woman. A year after the marriage, Maria realized she was pregnant. William was incredibly happy. He literally carried his wife in his arms. Cindy and David were anxiously waiting for their granddaughter to be born. They worried about their daughter-in-law, did not allow her to do anything, so that she would not suddenly get tired. They controlled her diet, her sleep. Mother-in-law freed her from all the household chores, although in principle Maria and before did not help much. And she was fine with it. But still, every chance she got, she reminded me, "The apartment is not mine. What right do I have to manage and change anything?" When Evelyn was born, and Maria didn't feel very excited when you were pregnant, you thought you were ready for motherhood. And when the baby girl came into the world, she was a very annoying young mother. I didn't realize she would need so much of my attention. She took up all of my free time, and she was soul-crushing. Maria, friend. Everyone said that the first year, the baby only sleeps. But that's not really the case. Not only does she wake up with the roosters and nice outside during the day, but at night she wants to play. Can you believe it? And I'm exhausted. I want to sleep too. And the figure of a girl. Look at what I look like. Instead of breasts, there's some kind of sacs. Her stomach hangs. Maria, we don't understand. We don't understand, her friends objected. Your mother-in-law is dusting you off. All you have to do is raise your daughter, and that's all you do. That's easy for you to say, William. He doesn't help me at all. A girl comes home from work and goes to bed. She plays with her daughter for maybe 15 minutes, and that's it. That's interesting. So you want your husband to work and take care of your daughter. And what will you do? Sleep. I don't know, but my daughter's not just mine, she's ours. That means that both of us have to take care of her. Time flew by. Evelyn grew up. She learned to play on her own and sleep longer. Maria went back to work, and she was glad she did. Every day in the mornings, she took the girl to daycare and flew to work. In the evenings, she did not hurry home. She liked to sit and gossip with her friends, drink tea, discuss the latest news. She didn't worry about the girl because she was sure that her father or grandparents would come for her. Evelyn did not reach for her mother and did not miss her unnecessarily. She loved her father madly. And about the grandparents, there is nothing to say. The child simply idolized them. And those in return did not dote on his granddaughter. William also adored the girl, but because of work could not give her much time. But when in those rare free moments they went out for a walk or to have fun. Little Evelyn remembered it all for a long time and remembered at any opportunity. And recently he promised to give her a small kitten. Evelyn clapped her hands in delight. But she immediately blew it off. Mom probably won't let him, she said quietly, looking into her father's eyes. Well, let's not tell her anything yet. And we'll see. Maybe I can talk her into it, Dad promised. The day before her birthday, Evelyn and her parents went shopping for a new dress. And that's when she noticed the beautiful doll that stood on the highest shelf. While her mother tried on her cover and twirled the girl in all directions to assess how well the new outfit fit, the girl kept her eyes on the toy. If you want, you can choose another dress. Which you like the most? Smiling, offered Maria. Can I not have a dress? I'll have a doll. Of course not. Immediately the mother replied with a refusal. Look how much it costs. No toy can cost that much money. It's not gold after all. But the grandparents decided to fulfill the dream of their only granddaughter. And the girl was so happy. She had already decided to go to the street to show her friends a new doll. As suddenly froze on the threshold and listened, her attention was attracted by a quiet squeak that came from the bedroom. Putting the doll on the floor, she decided to check what the sound was. Looking into the room, the girl saw a huge box with a bow in the center. Quickly opening it, she shrieked in surprise. Inside the dolls was a tiny gray kitten. Evelyn immediately ran out of the room and threw herself around her father's neck. Are you the best daddy in the world? She whispered in his ear, simultaneously wiping away tears of joy with her small palms. Then she rushed back and pulled her pet out of the box. The girl gently cuddled him to her and closed her eyes. This is the best birthday ever, she whispered. And when Evelyn left for the yard, Maria let her emotions run wild. You could have consulted me. I understand that my opinion doesn't matter to you. One gave an expensive doll, the other brought this furry monster. The woman was offended that her gifted dress was the one the girl liked the least. She almost cried with resentment. I want to remind you that I'm raising her alone. I'm trying to raise her to be a human being. All you can do is pamper her and let all my labor go to waste. And then Cindy, Maria, came to her son's defense. Her tone was steady and calm. Can't you rejoice with us with your daughter? Instead, you're only on her birthday. What's so terrible about a child's wishes being fulfilled? Your dress is also incredibly beautiful, but you have to realize that she's only 5 years old. And at that age, she likes toys more than outfits. That's not the point. The daughter-in-law was falling apart more and more. It's just that you all try at every opportunity to point out to me that I'm a bad mother, a worthless wife and mistress. But here you are wrong. Maria calmed her mother-in-law. Just by virtue of youth and inexperience, you do not yet understand many things. But all this will come with the years. So you're saying I'm not capable of anything. Maria, stop yelling at Mom. William suddenly spoke up. We're living in their apartment with everything. They're the ones helping Evelyn and me. And you have to admit, without my parents, it would be a little difficult. Evelyn spends most of her time with them. You have no right to raise your voice to your mom. Have you ever wondered why I still live here? Maria turned to her husband. Because my husband is so comfortable with Mommy. He hasn't even tried to get his own place. Every day I hear people saying we have to wait. We have to be patient. It'll be here soon. Yeah, I've been living on your promises for years. How much longer do I have to wait? William was silent. Cindy and David watched their son with a measure of sympathy, and after a little silence, the man said, "It's a shame. I wanted to give you an anniversary present, a surprise, so to speak. But I guess I'll have to give up that idea. I've got the money for the apartment. I've saved up. This weekend we can drive around and see what's available." Maria was speechless with surprise, and immediately there was no trace of resentment. She instantly cheered up, ran up to her husband, and threw herself on his neck. His parents left the room, leaving the couple alone. They were really happy for their son, that at last he would be able to buy his own place. But it was still unsettling. They understood perfectly well that Maria is not ready for an independent life, but maybe she will learn everything faster. My father-in-law said, "We can only believe it," nodded his wife. William and Maria soon bought a one-bedroom in a residential area. But the young wife was happy about that too. During the move, she only kept talking about how the girlfriends would get a place to live. But she was not happy for long. Independent life without her husband's parents was not so simple. Now Maria in the morning not only hurried with her daughter to kindergarten, but in the evenings took her away from there, because William did not have time to do it. And when she came home, she didn't go to her room to rest, but hurried to the kitchen to prepare dinner for the weekend in non-stop mode, when she had to do an incredible number of things in just 2 days. She didn't even want to remember. The woman had forgotten the last time she had gone out with her friends. Nerds were on the limit, and they scandalized her and her husband constantly, and for any reason. Maria often took it out on little Evelyn. And as a result, the girl became silent and withdrawn. Once at work, Maria's colleagues decided to organize a corporate party. Maria warned William in advance that today he had to pick up Evelyn from daycare. William agreed and left for work. In the evening, Maria's phone was ready to explode with calls. William and her mother-in-law tried to call her alternately, but Maria persistently did not pick up the phone. She realized that now she would have to go to kindergarten to pick up her daughter and disrupt her corporate event. But when an unfamiliar number popped up on her cell phone, the woman answered, "Maria, are you picking up Evelyn? The garden has been closed for half an hour already." The kindergarten teacher expressed her dissatisfaction. "I'm on my way," muttered Maria. In response, and glancing at her watch, hailed a cab. All the way she tried to call her spouse, but his phone was disconnected. After apologizing to the disgruntled kindergarten teacher and gathering her daughter quickly, she went outside. On her way home, she pushed Evelyn up every now and then, dragging her by the arm. The girl could barely keep up with her irritated mother. She heard her mother cursing at her father, calling him selfish, irresponsible, a worthless husband, and a disgusting father. And as they approached the driveway, suddenly the phone rang again. Looking at the screen, she saw that it was her mother-in-law. "What do you all want from me?" she whispered out of breath, angry at having disrupted the party. "Yes," barked the woman into the phone. Maria's unhappy. Or an old woman. William's been hospitalized. I don't understand you at all. Can you explain what happened? Maria asked, not hiding the irritation in her voice. William was in a car accident. She tried to explain clearly, swallowing her tears. He's in surgery now. I've been calling you all evening, but I couldn't get through. Maria left Evelyn with a neighbor and rushed to the hospital. The doctor met her there and informed her that William had died without regaining consciousness on the operating table. Injuries incompatible with life. They did everything they could. It took Maria a while to realize what the doctor had said. The woman looked at her husband's parents, sitting in an embrace on the couch. Cindy was roaring in her voice, and David, pale as a sheet, was clasping his grief-stricken wife. The whole week that followed was a blur. Black robes, lots of sad people, most of them strangers, and suddenly no one. Empty in the apartment, empty in Evelyn's soul, the only reminder of the past. The girl was more withdrawn than ever. She, like a shadow, wandered around the apartment, moving silently, and in her little heart settled universal sadness. But time does not stand still. Gradually, Maria came to terms with the loss. Unlike her daughter, who missed her daddy madly until now, the girl spent all her time playing with the cat that her father had once given her. The grandparents supported the granddaughter as best they could and often took her to their home together with her father. Only their care and love helped the little girl to come back to life. And when Evelyn went to school, Maria brought her suitor to the house. "Let's get acquainted." She introduced her daughter to him. "This is my daughter Evelyn. And this is Uncle Mark. He will now live with us, which means that he is now your daddy." The girls were not thrilled with their mother's new acquaintance. He was short, unshaven. He was the exact opposite of William. The man reluctantly extended his hand to the girl, but the girl responded by hiding her palm behind her back and whispering, "My daddy died." And soon Uncle Mark moved his things out. The relationship with Evelyn was not getting better. The girl did not want a strange man to live with them. And on the shelves of the father lay his things, but no one was interested in the opinion of the little girl. The mother was completely dissolved in the new relationship. She tried her best to please the gaggle, forgetting all about her daughter. Cindy and David were worried about their granddaughter. They saw how Evelyn treated her mother's roommate. They often took the girl to their house. Well, it was not as often as they would have liked. And soon Maria announced that she was pregnant and that she and Mark had decided to get married. And when Mark began to live in their apartment on the legal grounds of the spouse, then for Evelyn began an unbearable life. Stepfather constantly scolded the girl, punished for every little thing. And the mother turned a blind eye to everything, supporting the methods of education of the new husband. After a while, the family became bigger by one little man who was named Vanessa. And all the attention of Maria and Mark was riveted to her. All their free time they tried to spend together with the little girl. And when the mother needed to do something around the house, Evelyn played the role of a nanny. At such moments, Evelyn looked at the baby's tiny hands and fingers with curiosity. She talked to her and gently stroked her head, which was covered with a delicate tuft of hair instead of hair. Evelyn had no jealousy or dislike for her little sister. She believed that when Vanessa grew older, they would surely be friends. As time went on, the stepfather and stepdaughter relationship never got better. Evelyn's presence. Mako was annoyed, and he didn't even hide it. And one day, Evelyn overheard her mother and stepfather talking. "Are you out of your mind?" Maria was indignant. "Where can I put her? I propose to sell this apartment because one room for everyone is not enough. We'll buy a 2 or 3. Then the problem with your daughter will solve itself," Mark reasoned. "But that's impossible. I must get the consent of my father-in-law and mother-in-law," replied the woman. "Here are their shares after her husband's death." "Well, then we must explain to them that we're all cramped in here," Mark insisted. When they saw Kolya, they were immediately able to. And a couple of days later, when Maria brought Evelyn to her grandparents to visit, she decided to talk to them about it. After listening carefully to her daughter-in-law, her mother-in-law asked. "Maria, do you know for sure that you will find a place for Evelyn in the new apartment?" "What do you mean by that?" The woman was surprised. "I'm suggesting another option." My father-in-law entered the conversation. "You're going to take out a mortgage anyway, right? So let us buy out your share, and that way everybody's happy. You get the down payment, and we get the memory of our son." Maria didn't like that offer. She planned to get the whole apartment, but on the faces of the elderly couple realized that they would not agree to more. So she nodded in agreement. Cindy and David sold their favorite dacha, where they spent a lot of time in the summer car and garage. The proceeds, it was enough to buy out Maria's share and Evelyn's share. Maria was surprised, counting the money they received. "Evelyn, this apartment will be a gift from us when the girl grows up," Cindy clarified. Mark was the most unhappy about the whole situation. "Then let your daughter stay here." The man did not stop resenting. "Otherwise, I'll take her to the army and dress her, and then she'll burst into flames and go to her apartment. And she won't even say a kind word to me. I'll be paying this mortgage for the rest of my life. And these juvenile runaways are already in and out of the apartment." "Mark, I couldn't change anything. I tried to justify myself." "Don't be mad. We'll make money. We'll pay it off quickly. What are you going to earn?" "Igor started a husband in his store with our income, as if not to starve. But I want to remind you that the idea of a spacious apartment was yours." Maria smiled. "Who knew that this house was not yours?" admitted her husband. "If I had known, I wouldn't have been here." "Mark, what are you talking about?" Maria was frightened. "I don't believe that you're with me only because of the apartment." "No, don't worry about it. I didn't mean it like that." The man came to his senses and took his little daughter in his arms and ran up to him. He adored Vanessa. "It's just that this injustice makes me angry. So one of your daughters has an apartment and the other one's broke. But Vanessa has a father. And Evelyn only got an apartment from her father," Maria parried. "They ended up buying. They are two-room. One room was allocated to the parents, and the second served as a bedroom for the girls. The sisters grew up amicably. The older sister gladly took care of the younger one, and the younger one paid the older one with her love, which Evelyn lacked in her new family. Evelyn still paid no attention to her except when she needed to be scolded or punished for something. We had always been cool to Evelyn, and with the birth of her daughter, she had grown cold to her. And one day, when Evelyn was in 6th grade, the girl came home earlier than usual. Mom was at work at the time and Vanessa was at daycare. The stepfather had been staying at home for a few days. He had recently been fired from his old job and was on the lookout for a new one. Upon entering the apartment, Evelyn was struck by the woman's shoes at the door. Her mom had never seen those before. Seeing the loss, Mark became furious. "Why are you here so early?" he shouted. "Lessons are not over yet. Our teacher got sick and canceled." Evelyn excused herself for the last class, staring at the unfamiliar shoes. "And we have someone visiting." "No, they're the neighbor's shoes. She was just leaving," the stepfather replied, noticing the direction of his stepdaughter's gaze in the room. Evelyn obediently went to her room. After seeing her off, Mark went to her room. "You've got a lot of homework." Evelyn looked at her stepfather. It was the first time the man asked her about her studies for all the years of living together. "No," the girl answered. "Evelyn, you see," the man was hesitating, obviously choosing his words. "You probably do not tell your mother that the neighbor came. Otherwise, she'll just make up stuff." "What is there to make up?" The girl didn't understand. "Nothing. It's very simple. Don't tell everything." Evelyn did as Mark asked her, but it did not escape her attention that the relationship between stepfather and mother had become somewhat strained. They were often scandalized, accusing each other of every mortal sin. It was not uncommon for the girls to get into trouble if they got in the way. Evelyn stayed with her grandparents more and more often because that's where she was loved. And once, when the house was quiet after another scandal, Evelyn took a suitcase and put her things in it. told her mother, "Sile, I have no more patience for your husband. I'm tired of your constant bickering. Now I will live where I am loved and expected." Maria calmly accepted this fact, and deep down she felt relieved. At first, she didn't even ask her mother-in-law how her eldest daughter was feeling. Evelyn didn't waste any time. She tightened her studies, corrected all the bad marks, which recently became more and more. Teachers also noticed positive changes in the girl. She began to smile more often. She cheered up, and Evelyn did not even remember her mother. The only person she missed was her little sister. By graduation, Evelyn had already decided what she wanted to be in the future, and her choice was a psychologist. "Yes, I've made up my mind," she told her grandparents, "especially since our university has a department of psychology. And I've found out, well, it's not a bad choice," supported granddaughter David. "Psychology is a serious science," agreed Cindy. But Maria, hearing about her daughter's decision, frankly laughed. "Is it a profession to work? A vest for strangers?" She expressed her opinion. "Don't you have enough problems of your own? You're digging into other people's problems. Why are you doing this?" Evelyn's mother's reaction didn't surprise her. She probably, in her heart of hearts, was prepared for the fact that her parents would not support her. After all, her mother ridiculed all her ideas from childhood and called them delusional. "Well, at least I can understand you," explained the daughter. "Why do you so much time looking into the mouth of a man who does not put you in anything? How can you love him more than your own children? How can you have the conscience to say such things?" The woman was outraged. "Mark raised you, replaced your daddy. Vanessa adores him. Everybody fights. That's how life works. Mom, do you really mean that?" Evelyn was surprised. "He's a bum who sits on his neck all the time. He can love, but not me. And he could never replace my daddy. Your husband is a total Alfonso, a womanizer, and an egomaniac. He's no match for daddy. It's your choice, and you have to live with it. And I have no right to judge you. But don't glorify him in my eyes. I'm not blind." Listening to the eldest daughter, Maria, from indignation, could not utter a word. And when she was silent, he only gritted his teeth. "How ungrateful you are." But Evelyn only smiled at that. She remembered that she had never regretted it since she had left her mother's house. But why should we? The girl was unfazed. "I am immensely grateful to my daddy, from whom I got wonderful genes. I am immensely grateful to my grandparents, who loved me and put their souls into me, taught me forgiveness, and most importantly, to appreciate what you have. I am even grateful to you for giving me life many years ago, and most importantly, for not talking me out of leaving you back in the day. I am grateful to Vanessa, who loves me and sees me as a human being, unlike you and your husband. But I have nothing to be grateful to a stranger who came to our house on the spot and did nothing to earn my trust and favor." Maria remained silent, and only with a frown at her daughter, she left the apartment. Evelyn entered the psychology program. She was very happy with her choice and graduated from the institute with a red diploma. Next, Evelyn, several other graduates, as the best students, were sent for internship in one of the centers of psychological help to people who found themselves in a difficult life situation. The girl was incredibly grateful to fate that she got such a chance. Cindy and David were proud of their granddaughter, and at the graduation decided to give her their gift. Evelyn, her grandmother, addressed her. "You know that your grandfather and I love you madly and want only one thing, for you to be happy. We are proud of you and hope that you will continue to develop in the same direction you have grown and are ready for independent life." So we decided. Grandma paused to brush away the tears that were running. "We decided to sign over your father's apartment to you." Grandpa came to the rescue. Evelyn couldn't believe everything that was happening as she stood in the very apartment where she had once been very happy. "I thought it had been sold," she admitted. "Mom had told me that they had put the money from its sale as a down payment on the apartment they were living in now." "Yes, we bought her share then," David admitted. "So that's why you're left without a car and garage." Evelyn guessed. "And we don't regret it." smiled Cindy. "You're our joy. You're all we have left, William. So please accept our gift as a token of our undying love for you. Thank you." Through tears, Evelyn thanked them. "I love you too. You are my most dear people in this world." Soon, Evelyn moved into a new apartment. It was harder to visit her grandparents every day, but she called them every day to check on their health. Having finished her internship at the Psychological Help Center, Evelyn was offered to stay there to work. The salary, of course, is not very big, but you will get an incredible experience, said the head of the center, holding out the employment contract for her to sign. Evelyn, not thinking long, agreed. During the year, she got used to the team. But most of all, she liked to help people. After all, it was thanks to her efforts that people became happier. And from this realization, she got inexplicable pleasure. Vanessa often visited her older sister. From her, Evelyn learned news from home, although it was hard to call it news. In her mother's family, everything was the same. Mark was still out of work, but he claimed to be on the lookout for a decent job. "I've even seen him with other women a couple of times," Vanessa admitted. "I think he's cheating on Mom." "Vanessa, don't you worry about that." Her sister advised her. "The parents will figure it out. It's not a big deal to pry into a couple's relationship. Believe me, it's a thankless task." Vanessa nodded in agreement. "Do you mind if I crash at your place tonight?" "The school canceled classes for tomorrow," the little sister explained. "We're going to the exhibition." "No problem then," Evelyn said happily. Such evenings, the sisters stayed up late. They had something tasty for dinner and talked for a long time, drinking tea with candy. Vanessa shared her secrets with her sister and asked her opinion. She asked for advice, shared her plans for life. Evelyn listened to her with pleasure. She liked that despite their different fathers and age difference, they were very close. On the day of her 25th birthday, Evelyn did not organize a lavish party, but decided to celebrate modestly with her family. All were invited, except for her stepmother. But her mother, citing indisposition, also did not come, congratulating her daughter on the phone. Vasilieva sat all evening, was not herself, did not answer questions, all the time translating the topic of conversation. "We'll marry you off to a reliable man, then you can die with peace of mind," David said. "Grandpa, what are you talking about?" His granddaughter stopped him. "You have great-grandchildren to nurse. God willing. God willing," Cindy whispered softly. But fate had its own plans for her. 6 months later, her grandfather died of a heart attack, and her grandmother outlived her husband by only 1 year. But before she died, she made a will for Evelyn. To Evelyn's surprise, Maria showed up at her mother-in-law's funeral. In all these years, they had not spoken to each other. She hadn't been to her grandfather's funeral either. "And this is a surprise. I'm glad you're here," thanked her eldest daughter. "How could I leave you at a time like this?" replied the mother. "And here everything is the same," she said, looking around. "The wallpaper has just been changed, and the furniture is still the same." "Mom, what are you talking about?" "You couldn't believe your ears, could you, Evelyn?" "The same thing," Mother explained with a shrug. "It's been so many years since your father and I left this apartment, and it feels like yesterday. You could change the furniture. I don't think this is the time to discuss it," Evelyn said. "And I want to remind you that my grandparents took care of me, fed and clothed me. And you cut me out of your life." As soon as the front door slammed behind me, "Oh, don't push it," Maria waved me off. "I was always thinking about you, but I realized that you'd be better off here." A month later, her mother came to Evelyn's house to have tea and cake, which surprised the eldest daughter incredibly. What a surprise! Evelyn couldn't help pouring the tea. Did something happen? Maria asked her nonchalantly. "I'm your mother, after all. Can't I just visit my own daughter?" "No, of course you can. It's just strange why the thought never occurred to you in the past few years." She admitted it, but it still feels good. Maria silently looked around, as if in between asked, "What will you do with the apartment?" Nothing noble. I'll move here. You're alone. Why do you need a 2-room apartment? Well, first of all, it's not just an apartment for me, Evelyn explained. This is my home. It's where I grew up, where I was happy. And 2, it's in the center of town. It's a 5-minute walk to work. And after a little silence, her mother asked again, "And 1 room, it will be empty." "No," Evelyn assured her. "I'll rent it out." The mother's face showed that she was not satisfied with her eldest daughter's plans. Soon, Evelyn renovated the 1-bedroom apartment as she had planned and moved in, renting out the studio. At this point, Vanessa was already in her first year of college. Maria continued to meet regularly with her eldest daughter. Her plan was to get Evelyn to sign the apartment over to Vanessa. Why would I give my apartment to Vanessa? I didn't see what Evelyn had to do with it. But you two are friends. She's your little sister, you know, she's your younger sister. Maria's older daughter. That's selfish of you. I inherited the apartment from my father. Vanessa has her own father, so let him worry about his daughter's future. Evelyn, well, you know very well that Mark can't offer her anything. Her mother persuaded her. But seeing that Evelyn was adamant, she went for broke. And to be fair, the apartment is also mine, so I'm also an heiress and have a share in it. I did, agreed the daughter, until she sold it to her grandparents, and their will was, "Do you like it or not? And I will not violate it." "Yes, mother, you certainly are." Mark was indignant. "You can't even reason with your own daughter. What can I do?" "It's all according to the law," answered Maria. "Both apartments she inherited. I'm powerless. And what does the law have to do with it? When it's about family," the man insisted. "Where does she need so many apartments? Is she going to salt them or what? Why couldn't she live in a 1-room apartment? She could have given her sister a 2-bedroom. Especially since Vanessa is getting married. Kids will be here soon. Where can we fit everything in here? I, for one, don't want to share an apartment with a strange man." "Well, your suggestions. I've talked to Evelyn many times, but she just keeps saying what's mine, and that's it. So we'll just have to play it cool if she won't take the easy way out." Mark suggested it. She's renting out a 1-bedroom, and she doesn't care who she rents it to. So she should rent it to Vanessa. What difference does that make? Maria didn't understand. Evelyn wouldn't charge her own sister. Her conscience won't allow it, the mayor explained. And if her conscience allows it, then in a couple of months we'll say there's no money. Yum family so-and-so. Evelyn will not throw Vanessa out on the street. Maria thought for a moment. Her husband was right about some things, but the whole situation was a mess. It didn't seem right. The wife hesitated. Of course it was. And when one of the sisters is bursting with wealth and the other is starving, is that right? When Vanessa came home from school, her father decided to talk to her. "Daughter, Mom and I consulted and came to the conclusion that it is wrong when one sister has everything and the other has nothing." "I'm referring to Evelyn's apartments now," Mark explained. "She'd inherited them from her father." The girl reminded him, "I don't have a claim on her." "Maybe you don't, but I do," the father said irritably. "Greed and selfishness must be cut off at the root. What do you want?" "I don't understand you," Vanessa asked, and the father laid out his cunning plan to his daughter. Vanessa listened carefully and turned to her mother. "You agree with him?" Maria is not sure. She shrugged her shoulders and then answered, "But you have to live somewhere. Your James is a country boy. You can't live in a dormitory, and renting is expensive. You can't afford it. It's better than all of us living here. So you've decided to take one of Evelyn's apartments. I'll find the words. I'll put Maria's daughter in her place. We're talking about your sister." "Exactly. And from the outside, it looks like she's our blood enemy," Vanessa retorted. "Mom, Evelyn, your own daughter, is just like me. She's been through enough in her life. She's basically an orphan with her mother alive. I wouldn't wish that on her. And now you want to take away the last thing she has. What are you talking about?" Maria was outraged. "Yes, my father and I care about your future. And I think my father's plan is a good one. Didn't your father try to start doing something and earn his daughter a place to live? Has that idea ever occurred to you? I see Dad talks a lot, but he doesn't do anything. I didn't expect you to be so mean," said Vanessa and ran out of the house. She slowly took the street and pondered on what had happened. Vanessa loved her older sister, and sometimes she didn't understand why her mother was so cold to her. What could be so wrong with the child to kick her out to live with her grandparents? Didn't her mother miss her? Didn't understand that her behavior only increased the gap between them? Many questions arose in Vanessa's mind. She walked without making out the road, and when she raised her head and looked around, she realized that she was standing in front of the center where Evelyn Vasilieva worked. Had been here a couple of times, but then she hadn't paid any attention at all to the visitors to this establishment. Today, as she was walking up to her sister's office, she was met by several women. They were all different in age and status, and in appearance, but there was one thing they had in common. In each one's eyes had a deep sadness, to say the least, a detachment. They'd probably lacked love too, Vanessa suggested. Sis heard. Suddenly, she heard Evelyn's voice behind her. "What are you doing here?" Inviting her guest's office, Evelyn poured tea and sat down next to her sister. "Are you sad?" she remarked. "Did something happen with James? Did you have a fight or something with Mom?" "No, they're fine," Vanessa reassured her sister. A more expectant look came over her, but the girl remained silent, hesitant to speak. There was a feeling that she regretted her coming. Evelyn did not insist on speaking. She silently drank tea and occasionally glanced at her sister. "Olga, do you love your mother?" Suddenly Vanessa asked. "What a question, of course," without thinking, answered the older sister. "And why did you ask about it?" "Well, because I always wondered why she treats us differently," the girl confessed. "At one time I even thought that you were not her own. She's always neglected you." "Why? I don't know why you're bringing this up all of a sudden." Evelyn smiled. "But I just thought if I had 2 children I would love one less too." But Vanessa smiled at Evelyn and hugged the girl. "It's wedding jitters. All mothers love their children equally, and you will love both. So why are we treated so differently?" Vanessa wouldn't give up. "I've often wondered about that too," Evelyn admitted. "But I think my mother resents my father for leaving her alone with a baby in her arms." She shared her assumption. "Well, that's silly. First of all, how can you take offense at a dead person? And secondly, what did the child have to do with it?" The girls drank their tea in silence, each thinking about something else. Finally, Evelyn stood up, cleared the table, and sat down next to her sister, took her hand and said, "It will be different for you. Do you and Serioza love each other? And children will be born. You will love them. And Mom." Evelyn was silent for a few seconds and added, "Mama is just an unhappy woman. She should be understood and pitied. After her first marriage, she was left a young widow, and her second husband turned out to be a loser and an Alfonso." "Yes, I understand everything," Vanessa replied. "I love my dad, but he really, all his life, lives at Mom's expense. One thing I don't understand is why she put up with all this for so many years. Does she really love him? She's probably driven by fear. She's afraid of being alone," said Evelyn. "But she won't be alone, and we're being childish," said Vanessa. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and a middle-aged woman came in. "Evelyn, we need you." She disappeared as suddenly as she had appeared. "I have to go." Evelyn got up from her chair and walked over to her sister. "It was good to see you without filling your bright head with bad thoughts. You're going to be fine, and I'll always be here for you. And if you need anything, I'll be there for you." "I never thought that my daughter was so selfish." Maria expressed her displeasure when Evelyn once again refused to give one of the apartments to her younger sister. "But I guess I should have raised her better." Evelyn smirked. "And the grandparents, I see, didn't do it at all," surprised the mother. "They did, but they did it as they saw fit. And you have no right to judge them. They replaced my family, not you." Maria didn't like that kind of talk. She couldn't take criticism of herself. especially about her daughter. It probably hurt her that Evelyn was telling the truth, and Maria felt deep down guilty about her older daughter. Vanessa was preparing for the wedding. The date had already been set, invitations sent out and rings bought. But when Evelyn was offered the position of manager of the new branch of the Center for People in Difficult Situations, she hesitated. But I'd have to move to another city. I can't leave everything now, and there's a lot to leave. The director wondered, what or who's stopping you? It's not that. Evelyn was embarrassed. It's just that my little sister is getting married soon. That's fine. You'll take a walk and go. She offered to fix up the branch. Come back here in a couple years and take my place. Evelyn had no more arguments to refuse. The colleague who rented her apartment had also moved to another city. So Evelyn, knowing that the newlyweds had nowhere to live, offered them a one-room apartment. For the time being, until they solved the issue of their own housing. Vasilieva was overly grateful to her sister, and the stepfather was dissatisfied. And he didn't hide it. You could have offered a two-bedroom, he grumbled. After leaving, Vanessa often called Evelyn and shared the latest news. One day, she blurted out that her mother was on sick leave. Something had Evelyn seriously worried. There was silence on the phone for a while. And then Vanessa laughed and said, "Don't worry, it's nothing." And after the conversation, Evelyn couldn't find room for worry. She felt that Vanessa was not telling her the whole story. Then Evelyn decided to call her mom. Maria didn't answer right away. But when she picked up the phone and heard the voice of her eldest daughter, she could hear that she was genuinely happy. She surprised her daughter. Vanessa said that you are on sick leave. Oh, under the ball also cheerfully answered the mother. A couple of sneezes, and she has already panicked. Mom, is it something serious? Don't worry, I'm fine. Why don't you tell me what's new with you? When do you plan to come back? Not for a while. The work here is just getting better. I don't think we'll be fully operational until 6 months from now. Mark got a job. Well, he's been moonlighting here and there. Maria was floundering. I see. So he didn't get a job. Oh, daughter, I have to go. My mother was in an unexpected hurry. Sorry, not missing, she said and quickly hung up the phone. Evelyn listened to the short beeps for a while longer and looked at the cell phone, not understanding anything. This conversation seemed strange to her. Usually her mother was always dissatisfied, but here she was chirping cheerfully. 6 months flew by for Evelyn like a day, and the work in the branch was established. After the inspection, the bosses were not stingy with compliments. Evelyn was proud of you and her team. On top of that, she had a man in her life. They met Nick at the center. He worked as an ambulance doctor and once came to a call. He saw an elderly woman who had been beaten up. She refused to be hospitalized, but she was too scared to stay at home. Do you think this is the first time he's beaten me? She confessed to the doctor. I'm used to both of them. But this is the first time I've seen him this angry. Maybe the doctor suggested the police. Oh, no. What are you doing? The woman was scared. He'll do time and come back. Then I'll be dead for sure. So why are you with him? The man didn't understand. Where to go? No children, no family, no friends. This Herod took everyone away. Nick felt genuinely sorry for the old woman, and he suggested that she go to the new center for helping people. Not immediately, but still she agreed. Nick drove her himself and put her in Evelyn's hands. And then several more times he stopped by the center and was interested in the well-being of his ward. The young people's working relationship quickly turned into sympathy. A month after their first meeting, Nick introduced Evelyn to his parents. Despite the fact that Nick and Evelyn were almost the same age, his parents were quite old, intelligent, courteous, pleasant to be around. They reminded Evelyn of his grandparents, and from that day on, she became a frequent visitor to their house. When are you going home? I asked Nick. Tomorrow morning. The young man's eyes immediately became sad. I'll be waiting for your return. I will quickly come to settle everything with the documents. come back." The lovers could not part for a long time. They stood in silence and held hands. And the next day, close to lunchtime, Evelyn already reached home. Closing the door behind her, she gloried against the wall and remembered with pleasure the happy moments of life in this apartment, when her grandparents were still alive. Her memories were interrupted by the phone ringing. "Yes, I'm listening," she answered. "Hello, sis," Vanessa's familiar voice sounded. "Are you back already?" "Yes, I'm home." After a little silence, Vanessa said into the phone, "I didn't want to tell you this, but you're going to find out anyway. Mom's in the hospital. Let's meet her off the phone. I'm going to visit her this afternoon. You're coming with me." To settle the formalities of transferring to the hometown to be the director of the help center, Evelyn met with her sister. After much hesitation, Vanessa confessed, "My dad beat up my mom. She's lying there with a concussion and 2 more broken ribs. That's not counting the bruises, contusions, and abrasions. And I'm guessing it's not the first time." Evelyn guessed. Well, yes, she'd been on sick leave a few times, so she wouldn't have to go to work with bruises. But this was her first time in the hospital. "Why didn't you say anything?" "My mom asked me to. We filed a police report." "No, that mom doesn't even want to hear about it." A nurse stopped the girls at the checkpoint. "It's not allowed for 2. You go," Vanessa suggested and handed her sister a robe. When Maria saw her eldest daughter, she cried. Evelyn's heart squeezed. The always indifferent, always disgruntled, stern woman now looked like a wounded bird. Evelyn wanted to hug her, to hold her close, to pity her and promise that everything would get better. But she held back. She sat down next to her on the bed. The young woman inquired, "How are you feeling?" "Well, I'm fine now," the mother replied, wiping away her tears. "Maybe you can tell me what happened." Maria silently turned away to the window. Tears flowed from her eyes again. She was ashamed to admit to her daughter what had happened. "Mom, I can help you," Evelyn said, "but you have to want to." Maria remained silent, swallowing her tears. "Mom, why did Mark do it? He's been drinking lately." Finally, her mother spoke, and it was taking a lot of money. "And my salary is not much. So when I turned him down, he beat me. And this time, Mark brought his drinking buddies and I refused to set the table for them. Why do you put up with it? You could leave him and live in peace. Go to the police. Don't you want to tell me you love him?" "I'm afraid of him," Maria confessed. "I'm very afraid of him. He will never leave me alone." "Let's make a report to the police first," suggested Evelyn. "No. What are you afraid of, Maria? You can't even imagine how this will end. What can he do? Have you forgotten where I work? And Mom, I listen to stories like this every day, and I know for a fact that if you sit back and take it, nothing good will come of it. Either we get him out of your life, or I'm leaving, and I'm never going to help you with this again." Maria thought for a moment, and then whispered, "Okay, I'll do as you say." Upon learning of the statement, Mark came to his wife to confess. He swore and swore that it would never happen again, that he would work and stop drinking. But Maria, on the advice of her daughter, was adamant. After his wife's refusal, Mark instantly became furious. Losing control of himself, he began to shout and threaten to kick her out of the house. The guards chased the man out of the hospital and, at Evelyn's request, informed her of the incident. In the evening, she went to her stepfather's house after hearing all of his threats against her. Evelyn pulled out her phone and turned on the voice recorder, which was perfectly audible. "I'll pass this on." In a calm tone of voice, she said, "And if you try to carry out any of your threats, you'll go to jail for a long time. I've made sure of that. What do you want?" Mark asked when he realized he was trapped. "Mom's being discharged soon," Evelyn replied. "She needs to rest. That's why you have 3 days to move out." "Yeah, sure," grinned the stepmother. "Look for the fool. I'm as much the boss here as she is." "You forgot about Vanessa and me," Evelyn replied. "You don't seem to care enough. So you've got 2 apartments. None of your business. You had nothing to do with my apartment or this one. You didn't put a dime into it. What's the difference? It's the law. The laws I know. It's jointly acquired property and will be divided equally. That's if you don't get locked up before you divide it. Evelyn smiled. What do you want from me? Peace, Marge asked again. You get out of here, and Mom will take a statement from the police. But I have nowhere to go. Evelyn said, very confused. As far as I know, you have a lot of friends. Igor first, Evelyn. Ask them if they'll take you in. In the end, Evelyn, together with a lawyer from the help center, helped her mother divorce Mark and kick him out of the apartment. He spent a long time looking for arguments in his favor, but his stepdaughter's threats to put him in jail were more convincing. Having collected his things, he left on his return home. Maria took a long time to get used to the fact that she was the only one who owned the place. She also needed psychological counseling, and more than one to get away from the stress. Evelyn helped her mother as much as she could. It seemed to her that during this period they had become closer than they had been in their entire lives. Her mother was genuinely happy every time her daughters came to visit. And soon Vanessa announced that she too would soon become a mother. And Maria was worried about her studies. It's no big deal. I'll take a leave of absence. In the hustle and bustle of daily life, Evelyn never got around to telling her family about Nick, despite the fact that they chatted at length on the phone every day. The man was looking forward to seeing them, but he wasn't being let go from his job, as there was a staff shortage. Evelyn had not been able to make it. Well, I can't leave my mom right now. She hasn't fully come to her senses yet, she explained. Then one day Maria invited her eldest daughter for a walk. Lately they often walked together, discussing the news. Talking about distracted topics, Maria said, Olga, I thought long and hard and came to the conclusion that I want to give Vanessa my apartment. After all, she and James are going to have a baby soon. They just need a permanent place to live. Yeah, it's your apartment. Then you can do whatever you want with it. Her daughter agreed. Evelyn wasn't going to claim her mother's place, but she felt bad that her mother didn't even think about it. Well, just for decency's sake. After all, she had her share of the apartment. Yes, you're right, nodded her mother. Vanessa will probably be pleased. But you know what I don't really want. Evelyn looked at her mother questioningly. I don't want to be a free appendix in this apartment. What do you mean by that? The daughter didn't understand. A young family should live separately, Maria explained. Maybe I can live in your apartment. Evelyn was not surprised by her mother's question. Perhaps she had expected it and was somewhat upset. It seemed to Evelyn that her mother had fully realized her mistakes and was doing her best to correct them. But as soon as she recovered from the divorce, she was back to her old ways. Under different circumstances, Evelyn probably would have given her mother permission. But now her resentment for her spoiled childhood, for her mother's lack of love and affection, flared up in her with renewed vigor. She turned away so that her mother would not see her weakness and said, I'm sorry, but I have other plans for my apartments. I need them. What other plans? I got angry. Maria, you wouldn't dare leave your mother on the street. I dare to remind, not long ago, I already helped you not to stay on the street, answered Evelyn, turning around and looking into her mother's eyes. And I did everything possible and impossible then. And if today you've got it in your head to give the apartment to someone else, I don't hold it against you. That's your right. But it's not my fault. Well, first of all, it wasn't someone. It was your sister, Maria. And secondly, I didn't ask for help. You're the one who got involved with Mark. You're the one who pushed for our divorce and then kicked him out. Evelyn was horrified by those words. All her phantom hopes for their rapprochement and warming relationship had crumbled like a house of cards. She wanted to scream and cry herself to tears. But Evelyn, clenching her will into a fist, calmly said, I thought you didn't mind getting rid of that drunkard and tyrant who asked you to think at all. The mother parried. Before you came here, I had a husband who loved me and beat me out of love, I suppose, added Evelyn. Yes, there were disagreements between us. but like everyone else. Ignoring her daughter's words, Evelyn continued, "How would you really know? You don't have a family." Her mother's last sentence caused Evelyn great heartache. Like a hurt little girl, she wanted to hurt her abuser too. "So whose credit is it that I didn't have a family?" she shouted out, barely holding back the tears that were choking her. "My family is my grandparents. It was they who showed me what it should be without humiliation, without scandals and manhandling, where people love, respect, and appreciate each other." After listening to her daughter, the mother cooled down a bit. She tried to justify herself. It came out rather awkwardly. The woman was either reading something, but Evelyn couldn't hear her. "While I believed I was helping you get rid of a tyrant husband, you've been plotting to get your hands on my inheritance," she suggested. "And you know what I'm gonna tell you. Mommy, I have a fiancé. His name is Nick, and he's an EMT. We're getting married soon. He's got a job in DC, and I'm gonna transfer to his new branch of the Metropolitan Care Center. And if everything works out, we'll sell these apartments to buy one in DC. Any other questions for me?" Maria stood with a confused look and didn't know what to say to her daughter. She just remained silent, looking at her and batting her eyelashes, and all we could say was, "We're going to stay here." "Are we staying here?" "Yes. Imagine, we each have our own lives." Evelyn answered and turned around and walked away from her mother. And the next morning at exactly 6:00 a.m., her cell phone was ringing off the hook. "Evelyn, I understand your mother correctly. You decided to kick us out on the street." Territory. Little sister into the phone. "What are you talking about?" "Me. I don't understand," Evelyn clarified. "I didn't quite understand exactly what she was talking about." "My mom told me," Vanessa replied, "that you're moving to Washington and selling all your apartments." "That's true." "Well, most likely," Evelyn agreed, gradually moving away from the basics. "When were you planning to tell me?" Suddenly shouted Vanessa. "You know my situation. I'm not allowed to be nervous or anxious. And you didn't even deign to inform me that Serioja and I would soon be homeless. I think you're being a little dramatic." "Sis," Evelyn tried to calm her down. "Sis?" Vanessa asked her again. "Yeah, a real sister wouldn't do something like that. You know very well that we have no place to live. First you invited us here, and now you want to send us away like dogs. What about selling the apartment? Don't you think that's despicable?" Evelyn was finally waking up to her sister's attacks. She was uncomfortable with the tone in which Vanessa was speaking to her. "I take it this is in lieu of a thank you," she clarified. "I'd like to remind you that I called you in temporarily, not permanently. You and James wanted a loan. Isn't that right? I just wanted you to keep your rent down." "What mortgage are you talking about?" Was Vanessa nervous? "Yeah, we're struggling to make ends meet. James has time to study and work, but his salary leaves a lot to be desired. We can't even go to the movies, let alone make a big purchase. But I guess you'll have to move in with your mom." Evelyn suggested it. "I don't think she'd mind. I'm sure she would." And Vanessa said, "Unlike you, my mom doesn't spare anything for me. She wanted to give me her apartment, but you ruined it." "And how did she do that?" "Let me ask you something. Your selfishness." Vanessa was going, and she couldn't stop. "You've been spoiled since you were a kid. You're used to everyone dancing around you. You want to study, get an apartment. You want an apartment for another one. And how do other people cope? Didn't you care?" Evelyn, listening to her sister, couldn't stop wondering if her mother was so acutely ill. Vanessa couldn't have changed so much. After all, for so many years she had been an attentive, loving sister. What happened? Pretending. Thoughts swarmed through her head. Evelyn listened to the profanity and tears streamed down her cheeks. Everything she believed in and aspired to was crumbling before her eyes. The people who were closest to her had betrayed her once again. Evelyn had no desire to prove or explain anything. Taking a deep breath, she wiped away her tears and said in as calm a tone as possible, "I'm sorry, sister, that I'm not what you wanted me to be. but mine will continue to be mine. And yours? Yours? And she immediately dropped the call. The clock read 600 am. There was a ringing silence. The city was slowly waking up. Evelyn kept replaying Vanessa's words in her head. Everything swam before her eyes, and she wanted to scream, but her strength was gone. Tears streamed down her face, and her heart was beating as hard as if it wanted to jump out of her chest. Evelyn was pulled out of her daze by the phone ringing. The name Nick popped up on the screen. Shaking her head and to bring herself to her senses, she answered the call. "Good morning, beloved." The young man said cheerfully hello. "I hope I didn't wake you up. I have some good news." "Good morning to you too, Nick," Evelyn replied, trying not to show her distressed state. "I'm awake now. Did something happen to you? You've been crying." "No, I'm fine. Just a little cold. But it's really bad timing," Nick lamented. "And I finally settled on a transfer. He starts his new assignment in a week. I wanted to see you." "You're welcome to come. I'd love to." "Well, then I'll pack all my things not to return and come to you," said Nick. "And you don't shell out. Drink tea with raspberries. Believe me, I'll be as good as new by the time you arrive." 2 days later, she met Nick at the train station. The man was glowing in part. Dropping his suitcase, he ran up to Evelyn, and taking her in his arms, began circling her in place. "At last we are together," he rejoiced. Every day, Nick brought his favorite breakfast in bed and greeted her with a hot dinner from work. While Evelyn was away, he fixed the faucets that had long been poking up, changed the hinges in the kitchen cabinets, hung the portrait of her with her grandparents that had been on the table for several years, sent against the wall. In short, redid all the man's chores. In the presence of Nick, Evelyn felt happy and loved. The week flew by like a single day. On the eve of departure, Nick and Evelyn took a day off. In the morning, the lovers did not live in bed for a long time. And then, while the young man went to the train station for tickets, the hostess prepared a delicious lunch. Having bolstered life, they decided to take a walk around the city. Holding hands like schoolchildren, Nick and Evelyn slowly shaved through the park, enjoying the fresh, frosty air. They were warm and cozy with each other. The time flew by. Nick invited Evelyn to the restaurant for dinner. A glass of wine, light appetizers, romantic ambience, quiet, peaceful music. Everything contributed to making this an unforgettable evening. Nick took Evelyn's hand and looked intently into her eyes. "Will you marry me?" Suddenly he asked, and taking advantage of the girl's interference, pulled a ring box out of his pocket. At that moment, Evelyn's heart was ready to jump out of her chest. She had been waiting for Nick's marriage proposal for a long time and was ready to accept it. But she had no idea that this moment would be so exciting for her. She happily replied and extended her hand to the young man. Soon Nick left for the capital, and Evelyn stayed in her city to wait for a transfer to another branch. Having seen off her fiancé, she plunged headlong into work. Being preoccupied with other people's problems, the woman forgot about her own. Firmly decided for himself not to dig into the past and leave in relations with his mother and sister, everything as it is, she calmed down and got on with her life, accepting the marriage proposal. Evelyn asked Nick to dispense with the lavish celebrations. The bride and groom agreed to get married at a Washington, D.C. registry office after Evelyn's relocation was resolved. By that time, Nick promised to settle the question of rent. Spring was in full swing. Nature was leaving its winter hibernation, and the riot of colors around created a joyful mood. The Gulf, birds singing on different voices made hearts flutter. To top it all off, Evelyn was waiting for her transfer to Washington, and she couldn't wait to see her beloved. Nick, as promised, prepared everything for the bride's arrival. He rented an apartment for the first time, adjusted the household, studied the real estate market. And so the long-awaited day came. Evelyn gathered all the things necessary for the first time. She made an agreement with a realtor about selling her apartment and set out for a new life. All along the way, She thought about the last conversation she'd had with her mother and sister. "You are a bad daughter," showered her mother with accusations ungrateful. "I gave you life. How could I take care of you? Yeah, you went to live with your grandparents, but that was your decision, and I didn't kick you out. It's not my fault you couldn't get along with Mark. I didn't have to be alone for the rest of my life because of you. I was too young when I was widowed, and I needed a man. And you know, not everyone would take in a child, and Mark took you in. And you kicked him out of the house. You always made sure I was lonely because you're selfish. I don't think anyone needs him but you," Evelyn replied. "If he whistles, he'll come running. You have no right to insult him. He's my father." Vanessa stood up for him. "I've always loved you and respected you as a big sister. You've been my role model. But I didn't think any apartment would come between us. Nor did I expect the price of your love to be an apartment," Evelyn argued. "You're ungrateful." Vanessa echoed her mother's accusations. "For you, material things were more important than family ties." "That's not true," Evelyn replied. "I never stopped loving you. But you, when you learned that there would be no division of my inheritance, quickly abandoned me." Maria and Vanessa proved Evelyn and her wrong for a long time, trying to press on pity and conscience. But their arguments did not work on Evelyn, giving them a chance to speak. She walked away with the words, "I will not allow myself to be manipulated, but I think the grandparents foresaw this situation, so they disposed of their property this way and not the other way around. If you can't be happy for me along with me, I won't bother your eyes and will leave. I don't want anything from you, but I don't owe you anything either. Do you have a husband?" She turned to her sister, "So earn your own apartment, and if you can't, ask your father for help." In a new place, Evelyn settled in quickly. The team was new and young. There was a lot of active work, but Evelyn always got home on time. She gave herself the attitude that family was the most important thing in her life. The appointed date of the first day of summer Nick and Evelyn signed. As agreed, they did not invite guests to their first family party, deciding that it was just for the two of them. It was Maria and Vanessa, and still there was no word. But the realtor found buyers for the apartments to resolve the sale. She took 2 weeks of unpaid leave and went to her hometown to settle the formalities. Evelyn was about to return, but before leaving she decided to visit her relatives. Approaching her mother's house, she saw her sitting on a bench in the yard. It had only been 6 months since they had last seen each other, but it seemed to Evelyn that she had aged a lot in that time. Maria sat alone and concentrated, staring at one point in front of her. Sadness and longing were imprinted on her face, barely noticeable. The wrinkles before had become deep. At the sight of Evelyn's mother, everything squeezed inside. In that moment, she wanted to hug her and feel sorry for her, maybe even apologize for what she'd said in the heat of the moment. On impulse, Evelyn rushed to her mother's side. But at that moment, Mark came out of the driveway. When she saw him, she quickly got up and followed. Evelyn stopped, seeing off her mother and stepmother. She experienced a gamut of feelings, pain from another betrayal, anger, self-pity. Barely holding back tears, she turned and ran back. But at that moment, she heard a familiar voice calling her. "Evelyn, it's you." The girl stopped and, turning her head, saw her sister with a bag in her hands. And despite her exhausted rhythm, she looked more beautiful. Pregnancy was in her face, flipping from foot to foot. As Vanessa jokingly approached Evelyn, "How long ago did this arrive?" she asked, as if nothing had happened. 2 weeks ago. It's a long time. I'm leaving today, and I've come to take care of some business." Vanessa was silent, trying to formulate a question. "Yes, I just wanted to stop by and say goodbye before I left," Evelyn explained. "But no one was home. You must have missed your mom," Vanessa suggested. She was getting ready. The girl was silent again, clearly not saying the right thing. "To leave. Is everything all right?" "Yeah, I'm fine." "Then I'll go," Evelyn said and turned around. "Why don't you come over for a visit?" Vanessa asked in an uncertain tone. Not tonight. Some other time, Evelyn promised, and started to go on her way. But her sister called out to her again. Evelyn turned around and saw Vanessa's guilty face. Evelyn, she addressed her sister as before. I'm sorry for what I said to you the other day. You know, hormones. Don't hold it against me. I don't know what came over me, but you're right. I had nothing to do with your inheritance. You're the only heir to your dad and his parents. Yeah, I wasn't so lucky with my dad. He never thought about me. He's lived his whole life and continues to live only for himself. What did my mom see in him? Don't worry, Evelyn reassured her. I'm not mad at you. I understand. Everyone can make mistakes. The main thing is to realize it in time and repent. Evelyn walked over to Vanessa and hugged her, pulling her close to her sister. She felt a push in her stomach and bounced away. Vasilieva smiled and put a hand on her tummy and said, "Well, they're from the tribe," and met. The girls both laughed. After the conversation with her sister, Evelyn felt as if a mountain had fallen from her shoulders. The only thing that kept her thinking was, had her mother really gotten back together with Mark? Had she forgiven him? Evelyn hesitated to ask Vanessa. She was afraid to break the fragile peace that had formed between them during their last meeting. Why would you even want that information? I don't understand. Nick also asked. If your mom is fine with it, then you shouldn't even care. You know, Nick, whatever she is, she's my mother, and I can't live with that monster around. Evelyn justified herself. What if he hits her again? But you can't stop your mother from talking to him. It's her choice. You're right, I agree. Evelyn, sighing heavily. And then there's your sister. I don't think she'll let you hurt her mother, Nick said before leaving. Then, turning the key in the lock, he kissed his wife on the cheek and disappeared out the door. Evelyn thought about it for a while longer, but gradually everyday tasks distracted her from the bad thoughts. She plunged headlong into her work. On weekends, the newlyweds traveled from morning to evening to look at apartments. They decided not to hurry with the choice, especially since Nick's apartment was not for sale. On the secondary market, nothing suitable for our money. Disappointed, said Evelyn, returning from another viewing. Maybe we should look at new buildings, Nick suggested. They have lower prices. Yes, but we don't know when the house will be finished, and then we'll have to make repairs. You need a lot of money for that too. So it's better to make repairs again than to redo them. With optimism in his voice, said Nick. The next weekend it was decided to look at apartments in houses under construction. After waiting for the end of the work week, the couple were going to the construction company when Evelyn's phone rang. Hi, sis. She said hello cheerfully, answering the call. However, James' voice came out of the receiver. Evelyn, it's not Vanessa, he said. It's James. Something's happened. Evelyn immediately worried. No, don't worry. I said, I'm just calling to let you know you've become an aunt. Our daughter Vanessa was born while she's sleeping, so I thought I'd let you know. Congratulations, shouted Evelyn happily. And maybe you can come visit us too, James asked. I can't yet at work, she explained. But I'll try to come by New Year's Eve, just as my niece will grow up and get stronger by then. After saying goodbye to her sister's husband, Evelyn told Nick the good news, but she noticed that he reacted a little too calmly, even indifferently. I realize that they're strangers to you, of course, but you could have been happy for me. With resentment in her voice, Evelyn expressed her displeasure. I'm glad, Nick replied. It's just that I think it's time for me to meet your family. It just doesn't seem like the right thing to do. We've been married for 3 months, and your mother and sister still don't know. Yeah, you're right about that. But you know how complicated my relationship with them is. Evelyn tried to justify herself. But I promised to make it up to them. We'll go there together in the winter. I'll look at some more apartments in new buildings. The newlyweds chose one. The most like the new neighborhood and all the necessary infrastructure. Constructed yards are arranged for recreation for children and adults. Listed Evelyn. Pluses of this object. Even the metro station is planned to open in walking distance, and a large selection of apartments with different layouts and on different floors, added Nick. And from the window you can see a small pond. Evelyn perked up. I like everything, and the price. The price is reasonable for us. Nick: yes. But if my apartment was sold, we could buy a 2-bedroom in this house. Nick was disappointed. You know, the important thing is to start somewhere. His wife encouraged him. I've got enough money for a 1-bedroom. It's better than renting. Well, yes, you're right. The husband agreed, but his tone was still upset. But don't get me wrong. I've never lived off a woman. And now I do not want you to think that I need your apartment. What kind of nonsense is that? Evelyn was indignant. You and I are husband and wife. It's not nonsense. Nick continued. This question is very important to me. What are you trying to tell me? I just think that if you happen to be buying this apartment, you should have it registered in your name. What's more, I'm proposing a prenuptial agreement. Evelyn looked at her husband, trying to understand whether he was serious or joking. But there was not a muscle on Nick's face. He was determined. Well, all right, she agreed. If you insist. Yes, I want my woman to be sure of me at all times. I love you, my knights, Evelyn said with a smile and hugged her husband. Congratulations to you, Evelyn, said the representative of the man in suit and tie, handing the new keys to the same person. You are now the full owner of a 1-bedroom apartment with finishes. Thank you, replied Evelyn, and not hiding joy, looked at the people standing on the playground of future neighbors. Keys in a solemn atmosphere handed to all present owners of apartments. Then on the same playground, the developer organized a small amateur concert. And in the evening, Evelyn and Nick Happy returned home and discussed their move to a new apartment. During the conversation, they didn't immediately hear the phone ringing from Nick's jacket pocket, but the caller was persistent. Looking at the screen and seeing an unfamiliar number, Nick was surprised and answered the call. Hello. Yes, this is me selling. I'll be able to drive up next weekend. Yeah, okay, you got a deal. And dropped the call. Nick grumbled unhappily. About time. Had there really been a buyer for the apartment? Evelyn guessed. I think I'm the only one who's found one. What are we going to do with him now? We could have bought that bigger apartment a month earlier. And now we can't sell the new one. Why don't we just not sell your apartment yet? Evelyn suggested it. Let it stand. No, I don't think so. We'll be looking for a buyer for 6 months. As long as there's someone willing to buy it, we have to see it through. The boss is the boss, shrugged his shoulders, replied Evelyn. And the next weekend, Nick went to his city, and Evelyn, not knowing what to do, walked from corner to corner. And then the phone rang. Hi, Sis said hello to Evelyn, answering the call. Hi, Evelyn, said Vanessa, without much joy in her voice. What's up? What are you doing? Yes? I'm thinking about moving to a new apartment. Why are you so sad? Did something happen? I don't know where to start. I got stuck. My sister, Mom, and Dad. Anyway, they're back together. I don't want him to come home. We're too cramped as it is. Dad got a house in the country from his parents, but Mom doesn't want to leave town. Why don't you talk to her? Oh no, I'm not getting involved in your business. I've already given up my share of the apartment. We'll take it from here. Evelyn, what about you? You're definitely not going to claim it. Vanessa asked. No, I'm not. Thanks, sis, you're better than that. With all matters settled in his hometown, Nick returned home satisfied and said to Evelyn, I propose to buy a plot of land in the suburbs and gradually build a summer house. What do you think about it? I think it's a very good idea. Surprisingly, such a plot of land was found very quickly. And on New Year's Eve, the happy newlyweds went to visit Vanessa and Sergei. Hospitable, the hosts gladly painted the gifts brought by her sister and her husband. Evelyn was getting acquainted with her niece, and Vanessa was jokingly indignant. Here was my sister getting married and not even telling anyone. And when the first passions subsided, Evelyn asked, "Where's Mom?" "She moved in with her father," Vanessa answered dryly. The older sister did not pursue the subject further. The New Year's Eve party turned out to be fun. James and Nick. Despite the difference in age, they quickly found a common language. And on the eve of returning home, Evelyn asked her sister, "Have you seen your mom for a long time?" "I haven't seen her since she moved," Vanessa answered, and added that if she doesn't call her, it means she's doing well. Evelyn was a little surprised by her sister's answer, but she remained silent. On the day of the guest's departure, Vanessa received a call from her mother. "Daughter, can I come to you?" Swallowing tears, she asked, "What happened?" "Father, I guess I was wrong to contact him again." "Yes, come over, of course," Vanessa invited in a disgruntled tone. "But only in your former room. Our bedrooms now." "Oh, thank you, Vanessa Sushko," rejoiced mother, not paying attention to the warning. "I'm already near the house. I'll be right in." A minute later, the doorbell rang. On the threshold stood the mother, and seeing the eldest daughter, she fussed, and fixing with her hand the hair that was under the cap, thus covering her eye, said hello. Evelyn noticed a bruise on her mother's face, carefully covered with total cream. "Happy holidays, Mom," Evelyn said, hesitating to go up to her and hug her. "Meet my husband, Nick. And this is my mom." Maria introduced herself and extended her hand to her son-in-law. "I didn't expect you to marry such a handsome man," she said to her daughter. "But why do you have a beautiful daughter, smart and handsome?" "Yes, she got that from me," Maria said coquettishly. "Oh, why are we standing at the threshold? Why don't we sit down and celebrate?" "No, we should get back," said Evelyn. "It was nice to see you. Come visit. Vanessa invited us. Would you like to come?" Nick replied. After the meeting with Evelyn's mother, she felt bad. All the way she was silent. Understanding his wife's mood, Nick did not bother her. And later, from a phone conversation with her sister, Evelyn learned that contacted her father, Alina, addicted to alcohol. And as soon as they get drunk, they start to find out about each other. Vanessa complained. "Scolding turns into fighting. That's why I didn't want my father to move back in." "Why didn't you tell me before?" Evelyn asked. "What difference would it have made?" "Evelyn, you already helped Mom out once. Where's the gratitude? She blames you even more for ruining her family." Evelyn was hurt to hear those words, but she was used to her mother's attitude. "I persuaded her to stay, but she decided to go back to her father," Vanessa continued. "And when I forbade him to cross the threshold of our house, she signed the apartment over to me in solidarity with him and slammed the door loudly. As you could see, their relationship lasted a little over a month. And now she's living with you." "No. A week after you left, her father came for her and persuaded her to come back to him without her realizing it," Evelyn said with genuine regret. "Why should she be so nervous in her old age? Maybe she needs medical attention." "No, I don't think so. I don't think she'd want medical attention." 5 years have passed since then. The sisters still called each other, occasionally visiting. Nick and Evelyn gradually built a house, a sauna, and a gazebo on their country estate. "Our country house is not for work, but for relaxation," Evelyn said. And indeed, on every holiday, and just on weekends, they often went out of town, inviting friends to visit. Once, after a telephone conversation with his mother, Nick asked his wife Evelyn, "Would you mind if I brought my parents to our country house? They're in poor health. They'll be closer to us here." "Evelyn, since the day I met her, I've had a great relationship with my mother-in-law and mother-in-law." That's why she immediately agreed to her husband's proposal. And on the next weekend, the spouses went to Nick's parents and offered them to move into their house. "But what about our apartment?" Mother hesitated. "And what will happen to her?" asked Nick. "Let it stand she does not ask for bread." After a little thought, the parents agreed. And soon they were already living at the dacha of their son and daughter-in-law, and rejoiced that now they had the opportunity to spend more time in the fresh air. Evelyn was pleased to see the old people happy. She loved secrets. with her mother-in-law, as she had once done as a child with her grandmother. Nick's mother was an intelligent woman and tried to stay out of their lives. But there was one question she couldn't stop asking. "Evelyn, why don't you and Nick have children?" she asked one day. "I'd like to have grandchildren in my old age." It was a question that had been on her mind for years. She and her husband dreamed of having children. They examined different doctors, took prescribed medications, but everything was useless. Everyone said, "You're both healthy. Maybe there's an incompatibility between you," and no one could tell you what to do about it. Evelyn had given up hope of becoming a mother, and once in a conversation with her husband, she even suggested that he break up with her and find another woman who could bear him a child. But Nick was outraged when he heard about it. "Never, you hear, never suggesting that I break up with you. I love you and I wouldn't trade you for any other woman. If God doesn't give us children, then we'll live together and enjoy each other's company." Evelyn and Nick never returned to the subject again. They seemed resigned to their fate. But when Evelyn heard the question of children from the people around them, from those around her, and she felt uneasy. Vanessa and Serioja had another daughter. They were happily married, but Vanessa had little contact with her mother. Evelyn, having buried Mark, who was stabbed to death by a neighbor in a drunken brawl, was left to live in his house. She asked to go to her youngest daughter's house, but Vanessa didn't want to take her in. "I don't think she will be a good example for her granddaughters." The woman explained her decision. "I don't want any drunkenness here." Evelyn and her husband came to Maria several times, offering to help, to fix up the house that was almost falling apart. But the mother did not accept any help from her eldest daughter. "She abandoned us years ago and went to her Washington, D.C., taking all her money. So go there." She yelled at her, "I don't want anything more from you. When I asked you, you didn't want to share. Now get the fuck out of here. Forget you have a mother. You're ungrateful. I raised you alone without a father, and you ruined my family. You kicked my husband out. Vanessa left you. I didn't abandon anyone." Evelyn tried to justify herself. "You're the one who threw me out of your life like an unwanted kitten. After Grandma and Grandpa died, I was floundering on my own. Well, you're just going to keep on floundering. Don't mess with me. I have someone to take care of me. Vanessa has always loved me, unlike you. Yeah, that's why you live here in this shack." "Out of spite," Evelyn said. "It's none of your business. I can live where I want. Get out of my house," shouted after and running daughters Maria. Having become an unhappy witness of the last scandal, Nick forbade Evelyn to go to her mother, and Evelyn herself lost the last desire to visit this woman. 6 months after moving to the country house of his son, Nick's father died. The mother was very worried, but tried to hold on. After consultation, the spouses moved her to their apartment. "Cramped, but not in offense," said Nick. "Don't join us," said the wife. "We have a one-room apartment, but it's big." "Well, now that I settled in," as Mom said, "why should our apartment be idle? Let's sell it and exchange it for a 2- or 3-room apartment." A year later, the couple celebrated a housewarming party in a spacious 3-room apartment. That day, the house was full of guests. Vanessa and James, with their daughters, came to congratulate relatives. Friends brought a lot of gifts. The holiday was a success. Evelyn and her mother-in-law set a sumptuous table, and everyone was satisfied. And in the evening, after seeing his friends off, Nick took his relatives to the country house. They wished to stay with them for a few days. Evelyn and her mother-in-law were clearing the table when she felt very bad. Nick's frightened mother called an ambulance and called her son. By the time he returned, a doctor was already sitting near Evelyn. Seeing Nick, she said hello to him and smiled and said, "Congratulations, colleague, you're about to become a daddy. And you, mommy, do you need to take care of yourself?" She turned to Evelyn. "In the next few months, you should not have any excitement or overexertion.